Chapter 859. Shang Wanwan's heart suddenly sped up and thumped loudly. She looked around vigilantly before carefully taking out the wooden box. Even Jiang Yuqing didn't know that Shang Wanwan had already figured out some of the mechanisms in his study. However, she had never done such a thing before. She knew that once Jiang Yuqing found out, he would definitely fly into a rage. But this time, she was really too curious. Shang Wanwan carefully looked at the wooden box in her hand. This wooden box was made of agarwood and exuded a faint fragrance. The paint was smooth and the patterns were exquisite. It was very exquisite and luxurious. For some reason, the lock on the box wasn't stuck. Shang Wanwan thought that it was probably because he was in too much of a hurry to keep this thing that day and forgot to lock it. She held her breath and opened the wooden box. There was indeed a scroll of painting hidden inside. Shang Wanwan didn't know why, but she was so nervous that her palms were sweating. She had a premonition in her heart that Jiang Yuqing's secret might really be hidden in this scroll of painting. Then, she took out the painting. This thing seemed to be quite old. Whether it was the scroll or the drawing paper, they all looked a little old. However, it was well preserved. It was obvious that its owner treasured it. Shang Wanwan didn't blink as she slowly unrolled the scroll of painting. When she saw the content clearly, Shang Wanwan's eyes suddenly widened. In the painting was a woman dressed in palace attire. She was standing by the lake. She seemed to have heard something. She turned around and smiled sweetly. She had snow-white skin, cherry lips, and bright eyes. Her attire set off her noble aura. However, this bright smile and the craftiness in her eyes made people's hearts beat faster. If she was originally as bright as the moon, cold and noble, then this smile instantly added a touch of smoke and fire. It made people feel as if they could reach out their hand and grab the moon from the sky. She was devastatingly beautiful and had a heavenly fragrance. That was probably it. However, what shocked Shang Wanwan wasn't that Jiang Yuqing had collected such a woman's portrait, but that the woman in the portrait was Shang Wanyu. It was the Shang Wanyu who used to be so high and mighty that it seemed unreachable. But in the end, it chose to sever its desires and fall into the abyss of death. With a thud, the painting fell from Shang Wanwan's hands. However, the woman in the painting was still smiling so beautifully. It was as if all the colors in the world had gathered on that one person. It was incomparable. In an instant, it was as if thunder had descended from the sky. Shang Wanwan's mind went completely blank. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and she felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. From the inside to the outside, from the top to the bottom, it was bone-chilling. She stumbled and bumped into a chair, almost falling to the ground. "No, that's impossible, that's absolutely impossible," Shang Wanwan murmured in a low voice. No one knew who she was trying to explain or who she was trying to convince. That was Shang Wanyu. That was Shang Wanyu. She knew that Jiang Yuqing used to like Shang Wanyu, but that was all in the past, wasn't it? He was the one who had poisoned her. He was the one who had kidnapped her and sent her to the ancestral hall. He was also the one who had personally attacked Shang Wanyu. He had forced her into a dead end. If he still cherished and missed Shang Wanyu, why would he do that? It was precisely because of those things that Shang Wanwan was convinced that Jiang Yuqing had completely lost all feelings for Shang Wanyu. However, it wasn't until now that she suddenly realized that everything she thought was wrong. Shang Wanwan's face was as pale as a ghost. Her eyes were lifeless, and her heart felt as if it had been twisted by someone. It was so painful that she almost suffocated. She suddenly came back to her senses and hurriedly picked up the painting. Then, she bit her lip and looked at it carefully. The Shang Wanyu in the painting looked a little young, as if she was only 13 or 14 years old. Shang Wanwan's heart skipped a beat. She remembered now. This palace dress was indeed the one that Shang Wanyu wore when she was 14 years old. She was born as an imperial concubine, so her hairpin ceremony was naturally very grand. Shang Wanwan could still clearly remember that many people came to the palace that day. Everyone was laughing and praising Shang Wanyu. Shang Wanyu, who had just turned 15 years old, was actually just a budding young girl, but she had already attracted the admiration of countless people. Some people were born to be favored by the heavens and were the center of attention. Shang Guanyu was such an existence. Why did Jiang Yuqing have such a painting? Shang Guanwan's gaze shifted slightly and she saw the inscription at the bottom of the painting. It was a small line of words. On the 10th day of the 8th lunar month in the 31st year of Yuanjin. My heart is filled with joy when I see her, and I yearn for her. This was personally painted by Jiang Yuqing on that day. It had been 10 years since then. Shang Guanwan stared at the line of words as if she wanted to burn a hole in it. She gripped the scroll so tightly that her knuckles turned white. If not for the last bit of rationality left in her, she would definitely tear this painting into pieces. So it turns out. For so many years, Jiang Yuqing had only liked her, Shang Guanyu, from the beginning to the end. If he didn't miss it, why would he keep such a painting so carefully? And she, Shang Guanwan, was at most a joke. For the past few years, he had given her advice, and he had been obedient to her. She had always thought that she was special to Jiang Yuqing. But now, she finally realized that she was actually worthless to Jiang Yuqing. She threw the painting on the table and covered her face with her hands. She cried and laughed at the same time, as if she had gone crazy. Just a moment ago, she was still thinking of taking the initiative to repair their relationship. Even if she took the initiative to lower her head, it didn't matter. She was willing. As long as they could reconcile, as long as the wedding tomorrow could be held smoothly, as long as everything was fine in the future, Shang Guanwan's chest seemed to be surging crazily. Then, her face turned pale and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her aura quickly withered, and she fell into a chair. The guard outside heard the commotion and knocked on the door worriedly. He lowered his voice and asked, "Your Highness, are you all right?" Shang Guanwan's mind was in a mess. She was stunned for a moment, and her body stiffly put the painting back. Then, she got up and walked outside, asking word by word, "Now, where exactly is he?" Xian Li Garden, music room. When Chu Luiyue arrived, she saw Jiang Yuqing standing by the lake. He was dressed in a green robe and stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at the lake in a daze, and no one knew what he was thinking. When he heard footsteps, he turned around. When he saw that it was Chu Luiyue, his gaze became much gentler. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered, and she walked over. "Eldest young master, why are you looking for me?" Jiang Yuqing looked at her, and there seemed to be an undercurrent in his eyes. After a moment, he suddenly said, "I want to marry you. I want to marry you." Chapter 860. Chu Luiyue thought that she had misheard. "What?" Jiang Yuqing repeated. "I said, I want to marry you." It wasn't a want or a request, but a want. He seemed to be giving an order, not discussing it with anyone. It was a matter of course and self-righteous. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly as she looked at Jiang Yuqing. His expression was serious, and his eyes were clear. He didn't look like he was joking. This matter was so absurd that for a moment, Chu Luiyue thought that Jiang Yuqing had gone crazy. "Eldest young master Jiang, do you know what you're saying?" Chu Luiyue was baffled. Was there something wrong with Jiang Yuqing's brain? The night before his wedding with Shang Guanwan, he asked her to come here and even said that he wanted to marry her. "Of course I know what I'm doing." Jiang Yuqing seemed to have expected Chu Luiyue's reaction and replied naturally. "I've thought about it a lot these 2 days, and I finally made up my mind." It wasn't easy for him to make this decision. Jiang Yuqing knew better than anyone what he should and shouldn't do now. He knew that from the first time he saw Chu Luiyue's smile at the Wanjing competition, he had already developed some feelings for her. From then on, he purposely restrained himself and wanted to get rid of the thoughts he had about Chu Luiyue. He thought that if he didn't meet or say anything, he would gradually forget about these things. But it was too difficult. In the mystic forest, she had already made him waver again when she saved him. In the end, what made him decide to do this was the meeting a few days ago. At that moment, he almost couldn't tell whether the person in front of him was Sheng Guanyu or Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was very similar to her, but there were many differences. He had always known this. However, after that glance, a crazy idea suddenly appeared in his mind. If you can't tell, then so be it. Whether it was Sheng Guanyu or Chu Luiyue, it was fine as long as this person was standing in front of him. That person was already dead, his soul extinguished, never to return. He had once planned to bury the past and never mention it again. However, after Chu Luiyue appeared, he suddenly felt as if a certain part of his heart had been filled up. He had seen countless beauties of all shapes and sizes. But after so many years, there were only two people who could give him such a feeling. One was Sheng Guanyu. And then there was Chu Luiyue. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue came from a humble background and was not as high and mighty as that person, who was as high as the clouds and as unreachable as the sun. You just have to stay by my side. I can give you whatever you want. Jiang Yuqing said seriously. This was not a mirage of an alliance, but an actual promise. Given his status, he indeed had the confidence to say such a thing. Seeing Jiang Yuqing's confident look, Chu Luiyue was so angry that she laughed. Young Master Jiang, I'm afraid you don't remember some things clearly. Let me remind you. First, you're going to marry the third princess tomorrow. If you do this, what will you do to the third princess? Second, your status will change again tomorrow. From now on, you will be the third princess's husband and her subject. I don't think I need to tell you how to write the word loyalty. Third, from the beginning to the end, you didn't seem to ask for my opinion. Isn't this a little too arbitrary? Chu Luiyue raised her chin slightly, and her red lips curved into an extremely cold smile. Also, you really can't give me what I want. It was already evening. The sun was setting in the west, and the setting sun reflected the sky into a warm orange color. The night wind of early summer still carried a trace of heat. However, Sheng Guanwan, who had rushed to Xianli Garden, felt her entire body turn cold. Many scenes flashed through her mind one after another. One moment, it was the comings and goings of Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Guanyu. The next moment, it was the face of despair in the Imperial Ancestral Hall. The next moment, it was the painting that had been kept for 10 years in the study. She was filled with anger, but she didn't know how to vent it. She could only crazily surge in her chest, making her feel like she was about to explode. At this moment, she only had one thought in her mind: find Jiang Yuqing and ask him clearly. When the guards of Xianli Garden saw Sheng Guanwan, they were all shocked and hurriedly bowed. Greetings to the third princess. What was she doing here at this time? Where's Jiang Yuqing? Sheng Guanwan asked coldly. Seeing that her expression was very ugly, the guard didn't dare to hide anything and immediately said, Eldest young master is in the zither room of Thousand View Garden. This subordinate will send someone to inform. Before he could finish his sentence, Sheng Guanwan had already rushed over. Third princess, the two guards wanted to stop her, but they didn't dare to. Although Xianli Garden had always been managed by Jiang Yuqing, it was still the territory of the Tianling imperial family. If Sheng Guanwan wanted to enter, who would dare to stop her? The two of them looked at each other and saw the doubt and uneasiness in each other's eyes. Could the third princess be going to find trouble with eldest young master? Could it be that she's going to make a big scene? Sheng Guanwan didn't stop and kept walking forward. When she thought about how he was actually in that place right now, the hatred in her heart deepened. Of all places to go, he just had to come to the zither room. In the past, she thought that Jiang Yuqing was guarding this place strictly because she had harmed Sheng Guanyu. Now that she thought about it, he probably treasured the place she had stayed in before. She hurriedly walked over and saw the sparkling surface of the lake from afar. Just as she was about to go forward, she suddenly saw two people standing by the lake. One of them was dressed in green and stood with his hands behind his back. It was Jiang Yuqing. However, the person in front of him was dressed in a red dress, with long black hair and a beautiful face. Who else could it be but Chu Luiyue? Why was she here? Sheng Guanwan was stunned for a moment. She felt that there was something wrong between the two of them, so she instinctively stopped and hid her figure. At this moment, Jiang Yuqing's voice sounded. Tomorrow's wedding is between me and Sheng Wanwan. You don't have to worry about whether I've let her down or not. In addition, even if she's the ruler and I'm the subject after tomorrow, it doesn't mean that I have to do everything according to her wishes. Finally, I think that marrying me will definitely bring you more benefits than disadvantages. There are countless women in the Tianling dynasty who want to cling to me, but they can't compare to you. Not you. Therefore, I only said what I said just now to you. If you insist, then I'll ask you again, I want to marry you. Are you willing? Sheng Wanwan suddenly covered her mouth. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and suddenly smiled. Her expression was originally cold, as if covered with a thin layer of ice, but her smile instantly bloomed like thousands of flowers. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on her snow-white face. She was beautiful and peerless, and her eyes were as bright as stars. I don't want to. She smiled. I have someone I like. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 861. Jiang Yuqing was suddenly stunned. How familiar was this scene? Once upon a time, that person was also like this. Here, she told him with a smile that her heart already belonged to someone else. The same place, the same words, the same smile. The only difference was that when that person said this to him in the past, he didn't even have time to express his feelings. But now, he put down his attitude and sincerely asked Chu Luiyue to be with him, but he was also rejected. For a moment, Jiang Yuqing almost mixed up the two scenes. He couldn't tell whether the person in front of him was Chu Luiyue or Sheng Guanyu. Something suddenly surged from the bottom of his heart. He grabbed Chu Luiyue's wrist. That won't do. Chu Luiyue easily dodged. Although Jiang Yuqing's cultivation level was higher than hers, after the experience in the Red Moon Desert, her movement technique had improved too much. It wasn't difficult to deal with Jiang Yuqing. Chu Luiyue took a step back and raised her eyebrows slightly. The smile on her face faded a little. Eldest young Master Jiang, please conduct yourself with dignity. The disgust and disdain that flashed through her eyes suddenly pierced Jiang Yuqing's heart like a steel needle. The resentment that had been suppressed for many years suddenly gushed out. It almost went to Jiang Yuqing's head. He almost blurted out angrily, I won't allow it. You can't like anyone else except me. Jiang Yuqing's sudden outburst surprised Chu Luiyue. In her impression, Jiang Yuqing rarely became so angry no matter what the situation was. Even when he was harming people, his expression was always calm and collected. Why did it seem like he had been provoked? Chu Luiyue became vigilant and took another step back. She frowned and said coldly, liking someone can't be forced. Jiang Yuqing, wake up. Jiang Yuqing's heart trembled for some reason when he saw her getting angry. He looked at the pair of black jade-like eyes that were filled with anger, and his expression changed. He opened his mouth, but his voice lowered again. Ah, you, don't be angry. He murmured in a low voice as if he was begging her. He reached out his hand to pull her again. Chu Luiyue felt that Jiang Yuqing was really crazy. What was he doing? Ah, you, who was he calling? A deep sense of disgust arose in her heart, and she turned around to leave. However, at this moment, a voice filled with anger and resentment came from the side. Jiang Yuqing. Chu Luiyue looked up. Ah, what a coincidence, the person who came was Sheng Wanwan. Just now, when she was arguing with Jiang Yuqing, she didn't notice that someone had come. From the looks of it, she must have heard a lot of things just now, right? However, no matter how much she heard, Jiang Yuqing's every word was like a sharp knife to her, ruthlessly stabbing into her heart. This sharp roar finally brought Jiang Yuqing back to his senses. He looked at his empty hand. Chu Luiyue stood to the side, far away from him. Her entire body was filled with disgust for him, as if looking at him any longer would dirty her eyes. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. It was like this in the past, and it was still like this now. The emotions in his eyes quickly turned cold. He looked at Shang Wanwan and asked coldly, "Why are you here?" Shang Wanwan sneered. "This consort is the third princess, and this Xianli garden is an imperial garden. Why can't this consort come here? But you, Jiang Yucheng, we're getting married tomorrow, but what are you doing? You're actually asking to marry another woman. Jiang Yucheng. Do you even have a heart?" Only she knew how much her heart hurt when she heard those words just now. She thought that her heart had already become numb after seeing that portrait. However, when she came here and heard how he treated Chu Luyue, she realized that it could be even more painful. It was as if someone had grabbed her heart, pulled it out, threw it on the ice, and ruthlessly trampled on it. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Jiang Yucheng frowned as he looked at the hysterical Shang Wanwan. He had already sent away the nearby guards in advance. He originally wanted to have a good talk with Chu Luyue, but he didn't expect that Shang Wanwan would barge in and make such a scene. Calm down. As a princess, what's the difference between you and a shrew if you make such a scene? Jiang Yucheng coldly reprimanded. These words completely ignited the anger in Shang Wanwan's heart. Ha 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 ha. Shrew? You called me a shrew? Shang Wanwan pointed at her own nose as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world. She shrieked, "Jiang Yucheng, you betrayed me first." Then, she fiercely pointed at Chu Luyue next to her. "What's so good about this slut that she's worth it for you to do this? She's just a lowly thing, but you actually treated me like this for her." Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes dangerously. However, before she could do anything, Jiang Yucheng took the lead to speak coldly. "Shang Wanwan, watch your words. Don't forget your status." Shang Wanwan suddenly laughed. Her facial features were distorted, and her eyes were crazed. She slowly said, "Jiang Yucheng, do you think I don't know what you like about her? Isn't it because she looks 50% similar to Shang Wanyu?" Jiang Yucheng's heart thumped. His voice was stern. "What nonsense are you talking about?" However, Shang Wanwan turned a blind eye to his anger. Instead, she turned her head to look at Chu Luyue with a mocking gaze. "Chu Luyue, do you think he's sincere to you? You're just a substitute. Your eyebrows and eyes are exactly the same as my short-lived elder sister, Shang Wanyu. He can't forget that person. Now that he's looking for you, you're just a substitute." Shang Wanwan. Jiang Yucheng felt that something was wrong. He quickly stepped forward, grabbed Shang Wanwan's hand, and was about to leave. "Your brain is muddled. I'll take you to clear your head." Shang Wanwan flung his hand away. "Don't touch me. I'm very clear-headed." Her eyes were red, and she looked embarrassed. She stared at Jiang Yucheng and sneered. Finally, she whispered, "Jiang Yucheng, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid that she'll find out that you're just treating her as a substitute for Shang Wanyu? Or are you afraid that people will find out that you're still obsessed with Shang Wanyu even though you're getting married to me tomorrow? Or are you most afraid that people will find out that you've liked Shang Wanyu for 10 years, but in the end, you personally, slap?" There was a loud slap in the face. Shang Wanwan staggered and fell to the ground. Half of her face quickly turned red and swollen, and blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. It was obvious how hard that slap was. Jiang Yucheng looked down at her with a murderous look in his eyes. "Shang Wanwan, you're crazy." Chu Luyue stood at the side and watched this scene with a cold expression. It was as if she was watching a show that had nothing to do with her. Looking at the two hysterical people who were at each other's throats, she suddenly curled her lips and looked at them coldly. How laughable. The scene from 2 years ago was happening again. But this time, everyone's identities were reversed. The pain that they had inflicted on her in the past was slowly being exacted back on them. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 862. She hadn't done anything yet, but the two of them were already fighting among themselves. It was finally their turn to experience the bone-piercing pain of betrayal that she had experienced back then. Chu Luiyue tucked the loose strands of hair on her cheeks behind her ears, looking like she was ready to watch a good show. If it were anyone else, they would definitely want to leave immediately after seeing this scene. After all, the two people who were fighting were the Honorable Third Princess and Jiang Yucheng, who had the power to overturn the imperial court. Anyone who had anything to do with these two people would probably get into trouble. The more they knew, the more dangerous it would be. Chu Luiyue was different. These two were her old enemies. She couldn't be happier to see them causing such a ruckus. What was there to be afraid of? The ones who should be afraid were these two people. Jiang Yucheng's slap made Shang Wanwan see stars before her eyes, and a strong smell of blood instantly surged up between her lips and teeth. But this time, she finally regained some of her rationality. Chu Luiyue was still standing next to them. If she really revealed everything just now, the consequences would be unimaginable. Shang Wanwan covered her face. Her heart was filled with lingering fear, and her eyes were filled with regret. Jiang Yucheng looked down at her condescendingly. In his heart, he really wanted to kill her. Shang Wanwan had always been impulsive, reckless, arrogant, and willful. In the past 2 years, her temper had become worse and worse. He had been enduring it all this time, but he didn't expect her to be brainless to this extent. If he hadn't stopped her in time, would she have loudly told everyone what they had done? Although Jiang Yucheng liked Chu Luiyue, he had never thought of telling her these things. Such a confidential matter involved many people. If they weren't careful, they would die. However, Shang Wanwan almost revealed everything. Guards! Jiang Yucheng ordered. 2 people immediately came out from the shadows and knelt on one knee. Greetings, young master. The third princess is delirious for a moment and needs to rest in bed. Prepare a carriage immediately and accompany me to send the third princess back to the palace. Yes. The 2 guards didn't dare to say anything and just followed Jiang Yucheng's instructions. Shang Wanwan wanted to say something, but Jiang Yucheng grabbed her wrist and pulled her up from the ground. She was a little scared and stepped back to hide. The look in Jiang Yucheng's eyes just now was too frightening. Moreover, when she thought about how Jiang Yucheng had been infatuated with Shang Wanyu for 10 years and still couldn't forget her, she felt as if she had swallowed a fly. She felt extremely nauseous. Jiang Yucheng tightened his grip on her hand that was trying to break free. He gave her a warning look, but his tone was much gentler. You seem to be sick. I'll take you back to the palace to have a good rest. Shang Wanwan was both disgusted and afraid. Her wrist hurt from his grip, but she didn't dare to be presumptuous and didn't dare to say a word. Jiang Yucheng was satisfied and turned to look at Chu Luiyue. I've let you see a joke. Just pretend that today's matter never happened. He didn't want to kill Chu Luiyue. Besides, Chu Luiyue now had a mythological beast and a dancing lotus. His status was different from before and couldn't be easily touched. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. He didn't say anything else and directly left without looking sideways. He didn't even look back after walking far away. When Chu Luiyue's figure finally disappeared, Jiang Yucheng looked coldly at Shang Wanwan. What do you know? His voice was cold and merciless, as if he was interrogating a prisoner. Shang Wanwan shivered and turned her head away. I don't know anything. Jiang Yucheng squeezed her wrist, and her bones creaked. Shang Wanwan was in so much pain that her face turned pale. Speak. It hurts. It hurts. I'll tell you. Shang Wanwan finally couldn't take it anymore. She braced herself and shouted, I went to your study. Jiang Yucheng instantly understood, and his expression became extremely dangerous. You touched my painting? Shang Wanwan had never heard him speak to her in such a tone. She felt wronged and resentful, but there was also a deep fear in her heart. Tears flowed down her cheeks. I did touch it. I saw your painting. So what? Jiang Yucheng, from the beginning to the end, you only loved Shang Wanyu. You admired her for 10 years, but what did you do to me? Jiang Yuqing looked at her expressionlessly. There's no point in saying all this. For the sake of tomorrow's wedding, I'll let you go this time. But don't let me know that you did such a thing again. I'll send you back later. Prepare well. Don't make any mistakes tomorrow. As for everything that happened today, you'd better never mention it again. Shang Wanwan smiled bitterly. Jiang Yuqing, what am I in your eyes? But if you really treat her so well, why did you ask me to deal with her? Don't forget, you were the one who forced her into a dead end. Jiang Yuqing suddenly leaned closer, pinched her chin, and said word by word, I did those things. You don't have to remind me over and over again. If you must have an answer, then I'll tell you, I've never compared you to her. I can kill her, and I can kill you even more, understand? After saying that, he shook Shang Wanwan's face away. Shang Wanwan lowered her head, and the hatred in her heart kept surging. But in the end, she still said, I understand. Tomorrow's wedding. Everything will go according to your plan. Tianling Dynasty, 41st year of Yuanjun, June 6th. Third Princess Shang Wanwan and the eldest son of Grand Tutor Jiang Lizhua, Jiang Yuqing were getting married. Digression. At 6:00 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Chapter 863. The third princess's wedding and coronation ceremony was naturally a joyous occasion for the entire nation. The entire Xiling city had been bustling with activity since 3 days ago. On the 6th day of the 6th month, everyone's enthusiasm reached its peak. On the streets, red satin fluttered, and almost every household hung red lanterns for celebration. Ever since the crown princess passed away 2 years ago, the huge Xiling city had never celebrated so wildly. Countless people flooded the streets, and there were cheers and laughter everywhere. Everyone's faces were filled with excitement and anticipation. They wanted to see what kind of grand wedding it was, and at the same time, share in the joyous atmosphere. The streets leading from the Jiang mansion to the imperial palace had long been divided into 2 groups of black cavalry, each guarding strictly. The red brocade spread out for miles. Golden auspicious clouds were embroidered on it, and under the morning sun, it shone brightly, luxurious and imposing. Ordinary princesses' weddings were not qualified to use such a spectacle. But today, Shang Wanwan was going to ascend to the throne as the empress. As the empress, she naturally could afford to use these. In front of the Jiang mansion, 108 strings of firecrackers sounded in succession. Fireworks flew in the air, and a thick layer of fireworks covered the ground inside and outside the Jiang mansion. A snow-kicking black-headed foal appeared in front of the Jiang mansion. This was an 8th-grade demonic beast, with a strong body and strong limbs. Its entire body was pure black, and only its 4 hooves were snow-white, as if it was flying through the snow. Its fur was without a trace of impurities, and its eyes were blue-green, as clear and clean as turquoise stones. Amidst countless people's anticipation, Jiang Yuqing finally walked out at 9 a.m. Today, he wore a red brocade robe, and his hair was tied up with a white jade crown. He was originally a famous handsome man in Xiling City, and today's attire made him look tall and slender, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, very handsome. Therefore, when he came out, it immediately attracted a series of low exclamations from the crowd. Many women looked at him with bright eyes and blushed cheeks, their faces full of unconcealable adoration. Whether it was background, appearance, or talent, Jiang Yuqing was definitely the best. Such a person, only the imperial princess is worthy of such a person. A low murmur of discussion came from the crowd. I don't think it's that good to have a marriage alliance with the royal family. Especially when he was with the third princess, he was even less free. First, it's the etiquette between a ruler and his minister, and then the way of husband and wife. That may be the case, but from today onwards, the status of the entire Jiang family will rise by a level. Even eldest young Master Jiang himself will have more say in the imperial court. There are many people in the world who want such a good thing. Exactly. Previously, he already had a lot of power in his hands, but he didn't have a suitable identity. As time passed, it was inevitable that people would criticize him. But as long as he marries the third princess, won't all of this be natural? Isn't it all because the empress concubines suddenly passed away back then? There were many things that could only be urgently handed over to him to handle. In the end, after he took over, he was unwilling to return it. He endured until now and continued to do so. In the future, no one will be able to stop him from doing whatever he wants. Shoo! Keep it down. Are you tired of living? If such words were heard, they wouldn't have a good ending. Fortunately, the streets were crowded and very noisy at this time. Apart from the people nearby, no one else could hear such discussions. Jianghu walked to the front of the snow-kicking black-headed colt, leaped, and easily mounted the horse. Behind him, the ceremonial team had already finished their preparations. They carried mahogany chests filled with all kinds of treasures and lined them up one after another. There was almost no end in sight. Apart from the Jiang residents that prepared the betrothal gifts, no one could guess how rich the items inside were. Jiang lightly kicked the horse's belly, and it immediately moved forward. Gongs and drums were beating on the streets, and ceremonial music sounded. Jiang led his people towards the imperial palace. The crowd surged along with him. From afar, the array was astonishing. Because today's wedding ceremony was a little special and was held in the Lankuan Palace in the Imperial Palace, all the important figures of the Tianling dynasty directly entered the palace and waited for Jiang Yuqing's arrival. Jiang Yuqing sat high on the horse. When he raised his head, he could see the heavy and majestic imperial palace. His expression was calm, and an undercurrent flashed through his eyes. He had imagined such a scene many times. In the end, after so many years, it finally came true. But standing at the end of this palace road, waiting for him behind the door, was already another person. But that was not important. What he had to do was to cross that door. As for who the person behind the door was, it was not important. On the other hand, the palace had been preparing since before dawn. The process of the ceremony was complicated and tedious, and there were many things to be used. Chani checked with the people sent by the Ministry of Rites over and over again, afraid that she would miss something. In the main hall of Huayang Palace, Sheng Guanwan also woke up early and began to let two experienced nannies help her dress and make up. Of course, she had already put on a mask in advance. Although the wounds on her face had improved a lot and were no longer festering, scabs of different depths still formed because of the scabs. If she wanted to completely remove them, it would probably take another month or so. Moreover, half of her cheek was red and swollen from Jiang Yuqing's slap, and it had yet to fade. The two nannies were both old people in the palace. They had once sent several princesses to their weddings and were very experienced. But when they came to Huayang Palace to help Sheng Guanwan dress and make up, the two of them simultaneously became nervous. Sheng Guanwan was still going to ascend to the throne today. They had served several princesses before, but this was the first time they had served someone of this status and standard. Everyone knew that everything at the ceremony had to be done carefully and cautiously. There could not be the slightest mistake. In the 1,000-year history of the Tianling dynasty, there had been empresses before, but there were not many. Originally, they had all thought that the crown princess would inherit the throne this time. They did not expect that something would happen later, and Her Majesty would fall into a coma. After going around in circles, this position actually fell into the hands of this previously unremarkable third princess, Sheng Guanwan. In addition, the two of them quickly discovered another problem. Sheng Guanwan did not seem to be in a very good mood. She sat there expressionlessly, and the cold aura around her almost froze the entire space in the room. This was strange. Today was her big day. It was her wedding and her ascension to the throne. It was already extremely difficult for the world to ask for one of them, let alone her having both. From today onwards, she was the most honorable person in the entire Tianling dynasty. From now on, millions of miles of territory belonged to her. What else could she be unhappy about? Let's not talk about this. Just Jiang Yuqing alone is the dream man of millions of women. Which woman in the world did not envy her? But they definitely did not dare to ask such a question. The two nannies helped Shangguan dress and change into the phoenix coronet and robes with trembling hands. After everything was done, Chani's voice finally came from outside. The prince consort has entered the palace. A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 864. Upon hearing this, Shangguan's face, which had been as cold as ice, finally showed a trace of emotion. It was finally here. Your Highness, the prince consort is very handsome today. The palace maid who came to report the news said happily. However, the main hall was still silent after she finished speaking. Shangguan said calmly, I understand. This consort understands. You may leave. The palace maid was stunned. What was going on? Why did the third princess not seem happy at all after hearing this news? If it was an ordinary woman, shouldn't she be shy and happy when she heard that her husband was coming to marry her? But why did the third princess's expression seem as if she didn't care at all? The palace maid had wanted to say a few nice words to ask for a reward, but she ended up in such a situation. For a moment, she was at a loss and didn't know whether to advance or retreat. What are you still standing there for? Do what you should be doing. If there is even the slightest oversight, you will be held accountable. Chan Yi, who was waiting at the door, reprimanded in a low voice with a cold expression. The palace maid was startled and hurriedly agreed in a submissive manner. Why yes. With that, she retreated timidly. When she walked outside, she was still confused. Strange. The third princess and the prince consort had always been very loving. There was no reason for them to be like this on the wedding day. Could it be that the third princess was unhappy because she praised the prince consort? That was still possible. Thinking of this, the palace maid secretly scolded herself for being stupid. In the main hall, Shangguan looked at her reflection in the bronze mirror. Her injuries had been completely covered, and her exquisite makeup made her look even more beautiful than usual. Disregarding everything else, Shangguan was also one of the top beauties in Xiling City. Today, she was dressed up splendidly, which made her even more beautiful. However, her eyes, which carried a trace of resentment, ruined the beauty of her face. She looked a little bitter and unkind. When a nanny saw this, she smiled and said fawningly, the third princess's eyes are really beautiful. The third princess is truly as beautiful as a painting. She's like a fairy. After so many years, this servant has served many masters, but you are really the most beautiful one. The other nanny also hurriedly echoed. Yes. If the prince consort sees you, he will definitely be shocked. Shangguan sneered in her heart. She slowly stroked the phoenix hairpin on her head and asked softly, what's the matter? Oh. Then how is this consort compared to eldest sister? Shangguan's elder sister was naturally only one person, the former princess, Shangguanyu. As soon as this was said, the two old maids were instantly stunned and embarrassed. Shangguan was indeed beautiful, but compared to that person, she was still a far cry. Not to mention his facial features, just his aura was different from the rest. Shangguan was a worldly beauty, but the empress concubine's beauty was like the sun in the clouds, causing people to only admire her. Even if they looked at her more, they would feel that it was blasphemous. There was really no way to compare. One of the nannies reacted quickly and smiled. Today is His Highness' big day, so you are naturally the most beautiful. Shangguan didn't say anything, but her eyes were filled with sarcasm. She didn't need them to say anything. She also knew that her appearance couldn't compare to Shangguanyu. In that painting, Shangguanyu was only 14 years old, but she was already a rare beauty. It was no wonder that Jiang Yuqing had been thinking about her for 10 years. At this moment, the sound of ceremonial music suddenly came from outside. Everyone knew that it was the bridegroom's arrival. When the palace maid who had been reprimanded saw this, she hurriedly took 2 steps back and said excitedly, Your Highness. After the prince consort entered the palace, he immediately dismounted and couldn't wait to marry Your Highness. Actually, there was still some distance between the palace gates and Huayang Palace Hall. She said this to highlight Jiang Yuqing's love for Sheng Wanwan. As expected, even the two old maids echoed her words. It seems that the prince consort is deeply in love with your highness. He can't wait to welcome you back. Sheng Wanwan sneered in her heart when she heard this. Deeply in love? If they knew that Jiang Yuqing had fiercely slapped her yesterday, personally escorted her back, and even warned her for a long time, who knew if they would still be able to say such words? Sheng Wanwan lifted her wrist and covered her head with the red veil. The dragon and phoenix embroidered veil fell down, covering her eyes that were filled with mockery. Chan Yi walked over and helped her out of Huayang Palace Hall. Jiang Yuqing had already arrived outside the hall with his men. Under the gazes of countless people, Jiang Yuqing walked up and stood in front of Sheng Wanwan, extending his hand. He said with a gentle expression, I've come to marry you. On the other side, everyone had already gathered in the plaza in front of Lang Kuan Palace Hall. This huge plaza was paved with white marble. At this moment, the officials of the imperial court were standing on the left side, while the important people of the various sects were standing on the right side. Apart from that, there were also black cavalry soldiers guarding in all directions. There was still a red carpet in the middle, and it extended all the way up, crossing the 9 steps and reaching the entrance of Lang Kuan Palace Hall. The reason why the wedding was held here and the coronation ceremony was because the Tianling scepter was enshrined in Lang Kuan Palace Hall. Everyone knew that this was the symbol of the Tianling Emperor's authority. To the people standing here, the wedding wasn't the highlight of the day. They were more concerned about whether Sheng Wanwan could successfully walk up the 9 steps, enter Lang Kuan Palace Hall, and pick up the Tianling scepter. The steps that went up were engraved with dragon patterns, which were majestic and dignified. Standing here, one seemed to be able to faintly feel the suppressive aura it contained. If this place was already like this, then the power of the Tianling scepter in Lang Kuan Palace Hall was naturally even more unimaginable. As expected of a grand ceremony. This lineup is really grand. The people from Dragon Teeth Mountain and Chongshu Pavilion stood next to each other, so Mu Hongyu ran over to Chu Luiyue and the rest. Seeing this, she couldn't help but speak softly. Yi Ranran blinked and said, "What's this?" "Hongyu, you haven't seen anything more powerful." Mu Hongyu was a little surprised. More powerful? This was Sheng Wanwan's wedding and coronation ceremony. It was extremely grand. Logically speaking, this should be the highest standard. How could there be anything more powerful than this? Yes. Back then, Yi Ranran paused and looked around carefully. Then, she lowered her voice and said, "Back then, when the Empress came of age, it was even grander than this. Later, when the Empress toured the borders, there was also the imperial court. Which one of them wasn't more powerful than this?" Mu Hongyu widened her eyes in shock. That Empress is really so powerful? Even the ceremony for her coming of age was even grander than this. How powerful must she be? Of course. After all, the third princess is only a princess. How can she be compared to the Empress? Chu Luiyue listened from the side and smiled, but she didn't say anything. At this moment, a melodious horn sounded. The third princess has arrived. The prince consort has arrived. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 865. A voice full of energy rang out and instantly spread throughout the entire Langkuan Palace. Everyone in the square in front of the palace heard the voice and looked over. They saw 2 people coming in hand from the magnificent palace gate. The person on the left was Jiang Yuqing. He was wearing a red robe today, and his collar and cuffs were embroidered with dark dragon patterns. There was a green jade belt around his waist that was as wide as a finger joint. At first glance, he was really handsome. Disregarding everything else, just her appearance alone was top-notch. Our prince consort is really outstanding and elegant. No wonder the third princess is so in love with him and wants to marry him no matter what. Hey, don't you think about it? That Jiang Yuqing was someone who caught the eye of the empress. Naturally, ordinary people can't be compared to him. That's true. Even if you look at the whole West Hill, among the younger generation, he can be considered the top in all aspects, right? Everyone was discussing animatedly. However, at this moment, a somewhat abrupt voice suddenly came from the crowd. He's just a vile person who's trying to make his own camp. No matter how good his skin is, it's still unbearably ugly. The person who spoke didn't deliberately lower his voice, and the strength of the people present wasn't weak, so almost everyone heard it clearly. The originally noisy crowd suddenly quieted down, and everyone looked in the direction of the voice. They wanted to see who was so bold to dare to say such words at this time and place. Chu Luyue heard this and slightly raised his eyes, then was slightly startled. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. He was tall and very burly, and his skin was dark. He stood there like a small mountain that could move. However, what attracted attention wasn't his appearance, but the black armor he was wearing. There was a long sword at his waist. He was clearly a general. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there were very few people who could openly carry a sword into the palace. Of course, the most important thing was that he was standing in front of the officials, showing his high status. When they saw that it was this man who spoke, some people who originally wanted to watch the show quickly withdrew their gazes. TSK, they actually forgot about this killing god. He was the commander of the Black Cavalry, Meng Jingji. Speaking of this person, he was extremely famous. Almost everyone in the Tianling dynasty, regardless of their age, knew that this valiant general had been stationed at Shijiang for decades and had made outstanding military achievements. Although he did not return to the West Hill often, his name was still enough to intimidate people. If it wasn't for the fact that the third princess wanted to ascend the throne, he wouldn't have rushed back. Now that Jiang Yuqing was in control of the court and held great power, the only person who dared to publicly insult him like this was probably Meng Jingji, who held military power. General Meng, what do you mean? Jiang Lizhua was the Grand Tutor, one of the three dukes. He also stood in front of the officials, only a few steps away from Meng Jingji. When he heard this, his expression immediately turned ugly. Meng Jingji sneered. Not only did he not back down in the slightest, he continued to speak. What? Did I say something wrong? If he still had any feelings for the Empress concubine, why would he do such a thing? Why did he have to be with the third princess of all people? Thinking of how the Empress concubine had treated him and the third princess, it had not even been 3 years since she passed away, and the two of them were so impatient to get married. How ridiculous. If it was in Shijiang, anyone who dared to do such a thing would definitely have their head chopped off by Man Huangzi. He was originally a military general who had been on the battlefield all year round. His whole body carried a strong murderous aura, which was extremely cold. In addition, he really couldn't stand this matter, so his tone was even more fierce and imposing. Even the few officials standing behind him unconsciously took 2 steps back, afraid that they would be implicated. Jiang Lizhua didn't expect him to speak so bluntly and harshly. For a moment, his face turned pale with anger. You, Meng Jingji. You're impudent. You're humiliating the third princess. Yuan Wei, who was next to him, calmly stepped forward and stood between the two of them. He smiled with a gentle expression and said, Okay, they'll be here soon. How ugly would it be if you make a big fuss at this time? Calm down. Jiang Yuqing was so angry that his hands were trembling. It was clearly Meng Jingji who started it first. After he finished scolding, he was satisfied. But he didn't let anyone refute him. Those words just now were clearly heard by all the people in the surroundings. Meng Jingji looked at him condescendingly. Hey, this matter was done by them. This general was just telling the truth. How did it become a humiliation? It seems that Jiang Lizhua also knows how ugly this matter is if it gets out. Meng Jingji. Don't be so rampant. Jiang Lizhua was so angry that he wanted to immediately go forward and beat Meng Jingji up. But Meng Jingji was one of the top experts of the Tianling dynasty. If he went forward, he would only be asking for trouble. On the side, Yuan Wei stopped him while giving Meng Jingji a meaningful glance. General Meng, in the end, it's His Highness's big day. Please don't say too much. Just treat it as giving me face. Meng Jingji finally stopped talking. Countless gazes looked over, and Jiang Lizhua only felt his face burning. He held it in for a long time and finally spat out a sentence with great difficulty. If you have the guts, then say these words in front of the third princess. This old man wants to see how arrogant you can be after today. This is the way of the ruler and minister, do you understand? Meng Jingji disagreed and smiled coldly. This general has always been loyal to Tianling. Ruler? Not to mention that His Majesty was still alive, even if he had passed away, it was still unknown whether third Princess Shangguan could raise the Tianling scepter. At this point, this small farce had finally subsided. However, the reactions of the surrounding people were different. Some were envious, some were happy, some were disdainful, and some were mocking. Although Meng Jingji was a bit suspicious of having an army for his own sake, what he said just now wasn't completely unreasonable. Jiang Yuqing was previously engaged to the Empress concubine, and it was even time to hold the wedding. He didn't expect that something would happen to the Empress concubine, and everything would change. Until now, it had actually been less than 2 years since the Empress concubine's death. Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan's wedding really made people feel that it was inappropriate. However, not many people dared to say this. Now that Meng Jingji had caused a ruckus, the atmosphere immediately became very awkward. The surrounding space seemed to have become a bit colder, as if it was frozen. Chu Luiyue glanced at Meng Jingji, her heart filled with mixed feelings. Because she never thought that Meng Jingji would actually speak up for her. In her impression, she had only seen Meng Jingji a few times, and he always had a dark face and looked very fierce. In addition, she had supported Mu Qinghe to be the deputy general of the Black Cavalry, so to a certain extent, she had divided up Meng Jingji's power. She had always thought that Meng Jingji didn't have a good impression of her. She didn't expect that. The newcomer has arrived. Give your first greeting, ascend the steps of the 9th heaven. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 866. At this moment, Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan had already walked over hand in hand and stood in the middle of the square in front of the hall. All the discussions had dissipated at this moment. Countless gazes were focused on the two of them. Shangguan was also dressed splendidly today. Her bright red phoenix tail trailed behind her. With every step she took, the golden threads buried in the cloud brocade material sparkled. Even though she was still covered with a veil and no one could see her appearance, just by looking at her attire, they could tell that she was very luxurious. Next, the two of them would walk up the 9 steps together and formally bow in front of Lankuan Hall. Logically speaking, since His Majesty was still alive, he should be waiting for the two of them in front of the door. However, because he was still unconscious, this step was omitted. Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan held hands tightly and stood side by side, looking like a perfect couple. Wan, let's go. Jiang Yuqing tilted his head slightly with a smile on his face. His voice was also very gentle. It was as if the woman beside him was the love of his life. Shangguan nodded lightly. No one could see her expression at this moment. The two of them walked forward hand in hand. Shangguan took the lead and stepped onto the first step. Jiang Yuqing deliberately fell back half a step to show his respect. No one could find fault with his every word and action. Shangguan continued to walk up and stepped onto the second step. At this point, one could already feel the faint pressure spreading from the Lankuan palace. However, this was nothing to Shangguan and Jiang Yuqing. The two of them walked up step by step, and the pressure on their bodies also became heavier and heavier. Every time they walked up a step, they needed to mobilize more force to resist this increasingly stronger force. When they reached the 7th step, Shangguan felt a little powerless. Although she was now at the early stage of the 7th rank, she had just recovered her Yuan meridian after all, and the strength she could display was not that strong. His entire body felt like it was filled with lead, incomparably heavy. Jiang Yucheng, who was by the side, quickly noticed that something was amiss with Sheng Wanwan. During this period of time, he relied on some methods to barely recover his strength to the peak of the 7th stage. Although it was a little better than Sheng Wanwan, the pressure in the Lankuan palace was not to be underestimated. He secretly exerted more strength in his hand and sent Sheng Wanwan to the 8th step. Sheng Wanwan's legs trembled and her body swayed. Jiang Yucheng frowned inwardly and quickly supported her. Then, he gritted his teeth and climbed to the 8th step. Standing here, he could clearly see that the door of Lang Kuan Hall was open. Usually, the door to Lang Kuan Palace was tightly locked. Only during the coronation ceremony would the elders of the royal family work together to open it. Once this barrier was opened, the pressure of the Tianling scepter spread unstoppably in all directions. It was precisely because of this that Sheng Wanwan and Jiang Yucheng encountered such a terrifying pressure. The closer they got, the more shocking the aura was. The people standing in the square below were also staring intently. When they saw that Sheng Wanwan's footsteps seemed to be a little shaky, some people's expressions changed slightly. Did the third princess lose her footing just now? An extremely low voice came from the crowd. She was wearing a phoenix coronet and a robe with a wide skirt behind her. However, many people still saw her swaying just now. It shouldn't be, right? If she can't go up now, how can she raise the Tianling scepter? Someone retorted, but his tone was very uncertain. In the history of the Tianling dynasty, there were precedents of people who couldn't raise the Tianling scepter. After careful calculation, there were a total of 4 people. The final outcome of these people, without exception, was that they were all deprived of the right to inherit the imperial power and never had the chance to start over again. To them, this was an undeniable shame and humiliation. Even though they could retain their status as members of the imperial family and eat, wear, and use the same things as before, because of this failure, they would never be able to raise their heads again for the rest of their lives. Among the 4 people, 2 of them couldn't bear the pressure after the failure and chose to commit suicide. Another one was greedy for cultivation and ultimately suffered from qi deviation, severing his own yuan meridian and dying. As for the last person, he never took a step out of the palace again and died in less than 3 years. It was obvious how important the matter of raising the Tianling scepter was to the heir to the throne. It was also because of this that every emperor would be especially careful when selecting their heirs. Most of them would be evaluated from a very young age based on their talents. They would first select a few with good conditions and focus on nurturing them. When they grew up, they would then select the best one. However, Sheng Wanwan was never the one who was chosen and thought highly of. On one hand, it was because her birth mother's status was low and she wasn't valued since she was young. On the other hand, she had never displayed any amazing talents and was even more invisible. Most importantly, ever since Sheng Wanyu was born and found to have the Tianjing Yuan meridian, the current emperor had directly selected her and never thought of a second person. The Tianjing Yuan meridian that only appeared once in 1,000 years was extremely precious. It was actually very normal for the emperor to do this. However, no one would have thought that something would happen to her on the eve of her wedding. In the 2 years that followed, Jiang Yucheng and Sheng Wanwan joined forces and gradually took control of the court. Other than Sheng Wanwan, there was really no one more suitable than her. The countless gazes behind her made Sheng Wanwan feel as if there was a blade on her back. She knew that at this time, any small mistake would be infinitely magnified. She clenched her teeth and crazily circulated the force in her body. She tried to raise her leg and climb up the last step. However, it was as if there was a heavy weight on her legs and she couldn't move at all. She began to feel anxious. Her heart was burning with anxiety. If she couldn't even go up here, then wouldn't the back? At this moment, Jiang Yucheng injected a force into her body from her palm. Sheng Wanwan instantly felt much more relaxed and hurriedly raised her leg and took this step. Jiang Yucheng followed closely behind. The 2 of them held their hands tightly and, one in front and one behind, finally climbed up the last step. Stepping on the ground, Shang Guanwan finally heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. In front of the Lankuan Hall, 6 royal elders lined up in a row and respectfully waited for the 2 of them to arrive. Actually, there should have been 8 of them. Unfortunately, Elder Qiushi and Elder Duanmu Chun had both died in Dahuang Swamp previously, so there were only 6 people left now. The elder standing at the side took a step forward and concentrated his qi in his dantian. His voice was like a large bell that spread far and wide. First bow to the heavenly Tao. Shang Guanwan and Jiang Yuqing turned around and bowed to heaven and earth. Second bow to the heavenly order. The 2 of them turned around again and bowed to the Lankuan Hall. The celestial emperors bowed to each other. The 2 of them stood facing each other. In an instant, Shang Guanwan's mind went blank. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 867. She had been waiting for this day for far too long. She had thought that they would finally get married, but in reality, the man in front of her had never liked her in the slightest. The music of the ceremony drifted over. At this moment, she was the center of attention, high and mighty. She had thought that she would be elated on this day. But when it really came to this moment, she suddenly felt empty. Thinking of that painting, her hands couldn't help but tremble, and endless hatred surged in her heart. Jiang Yuqing was about to bend down, but he saw that Shang Guanwan didn't seem to have any intention of moving. A trace of coldness flashed across his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. Then, he gently and softly called out to her. There was a smile on his face, and his voice was very gentle, as if he was afraid of disturbing something. But the look in his eyes was so cold. At this moment, Shang Guanwan couldn't see his face clearly, and could only see a faint outline. But when she heard his voice, Shang Guanwan's heart trembled unconsciously, and she felt a little scared. The fierce and cold way he treated her yesterday was still clearly engraved in her mind. She suppressed the emotions in her heart, closed her eyes, and finally bowed down for the last time. Seeing that she was obedient, Jiang Yuqing felt a lot more at ease, and almost bowed to her at the same time. The old man cheered. The ceremony is over. The crowd immediately cheered and celebrated. Firecrackers and fireworks were set off. The huge square was extraordinarily lively. But all of this sounded incomparably ironic to Shang Guanwan's ears. Every word of celebration, every blessing, at this moment, seemed to have become a curse to her. What love, what sincerity, what deep love between husband and wife. It was all a joke. She had waited so long for this day, and worked so hard for so long, but in the end, she had married a man who had never cared about her. And this man had even proposed to another woman the day before their wedding. It was only because that woman was somewhat similar to the Shangguan Yu he had studied for 10 years. Were finally together. A doting smile appeared on Jiang Yuqing's handsome face. He walked forward and lifted Shang Guanwan's veil. Today, Shang Guanwan wore exquisite makeup and a phoenix hairpin in her hair, looking luxurious and beautiful. Standing next to Jiang Yuqing, they were a perfect match. The third princess and the prince consort are truly a match made in heaven. Yes. Whether it's family background, appearance, or anything else, there's really nothing more compatible than this. The crowd was in an uproar. It was as if everyone was overjoyed. Is this considered a success? Mu Hongyu glanced at it and couldn't help but frown. She moved closer to Chu Luyue and whispered, "Luyu, don't you think the two of them are weird?" What was strange about it? That's right. Oh, I don't know what to say. Anyway, I just feel that the two of them don't seem very happy. Although they're standing together, they seem to be a little distant from each other. In short, it's a little strange. They don't seem to be a good match. It wasn't that she hadn't seen people get married before. Although the occasion wasn't so grand, most of the people who got married were very affectionate. Just by looking at each other, without saying anything, one could tell that they were really in love. However, Sheng Guanwan and Jiang Yuqing didn't feel that way. Chu Luo smiled slightly. How are they not a good match? I think they're a match made in heaven. Seeing the two of them standing on the steps and bowing to get married, she felt a burst of joy in her heart. Fortunately, she didn't marry Jiang Yuqing back then. Otherwise, she would be disgusted for the rest of her life. Such a man was the best match for Sheng Guanwan. On the stage, Sheng Guanwan was also smiling. The two of them seemed to be very happy, but only they knew what they were thinking at the moment. Jiang Yuqing reached out and held Sheng Guanwan's hand. Sheng Guanwan felt cold all over and only felt disgusted in her heart. However, she didn't dare to forcefully break free and could only smile again. The two of them were equally matched in acting. For a moment, they confused many people who didn't know the inside story. In the eyes of most people, everything was going smoothly. The two of them standing on the steps were also harmonious and beautiful. At this moment, the old man who was singing the ceremony opened his mouth again. Please, Tianling scepter. This voice was full of energy and echoed in the sky above Lang Kuan Palace for a long time. It was transmitted clearly to everyone's ears. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Immediately, they focused their attention and looked over. The remaining 5 elders of the imperial family nodded and turned to enter Lang Kuan Palace. Countless eyes were focused on the door, eager and excited. They all knew that what was about to happen next was the real grand finale. Buzz! A deafening roar suddenly came from the Lang Kuan Palace. Many people were shocked and hurriedly used their force to set up a barrier in front of them. Swoosh! The elder who was singing the ceremony waved his sleeve and set up a silver barrier at the bottom of the steps, blocking this terrifying fluctuation. At this moment, the 5 elders finally walked out of Lang Kuan Palace. A huge square black crystal was moved out by the few of them. Then, it sat on the ground. Bang! A muffled sound. Almost even the ground trembled fiercely. That black crystal was half the height of a person, and on top of it, there was a scepter floating quietly. The lustrous glow shrouded it, and its appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but its power was shocking. Although a barrier had been set up in front of them, the people in the palace still found it difficult to breathe. However, at this moment, they couldn't care less. Everyone's eyes fell on that place. That was the symbol of the imperial power of the Tianling Empire, Tianling scepter. The old man who was singing the ceremony knelt on one knee. Third princess, please use the scepter. Digression, 6 points. The Great Way of the Magic Doctor, 1/Gray Cutie Meng, 1v1 refreshing one without abuse. She went against the heavens to prove the devil's path. He cut through all obstacles just to protect her. He said, "You want the world, I want you." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 868. The other 5 royal elders also knelt down and said in unison, "Third princess, please hold the scepter." Sheng Guanwan looked at the Tianling scepter floating above the black crystal, took a deep breath, and walked forward slowly. Finally, she stood a step away from the heavens-writ scepter. Everyone fell silent as they watched the scene unfold before them. As long as Sheng Guanwan successfully held the Tianling scepter, she would be able to ascend the throne. From then on, she would wield the power of the Tianling dynasty. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Sheng Guanwan's heart was beating violently. It was almost shattering her eardrums. All the blood in her body seemed to be boiling, rushing through her limbs and bones. Because she was nervous, her palms were sweaty, and both her hands were wet and sticky. The Tianling scepter was extremely heavy. And the aura it contained was extremely powerful. After all, it was left behind by Taizu himself. Not to mention lifting it, just standing there made Sheng Guanwan feel a tightness in her chest, and she almost knelt on the ground. To lift it, strength alone wasn't enough. At the same time, one had to have the bloodline of the Tianling royal family. Most importantly, one had to gain the Tianling scepter's approval. To any successor of the Tianling dynasty, this was a threshold that had to be crossed. If they succeeded, they would become a supreme existence above millions of people. If they failed, they would become the laughingstock of the world, and they would never be able to make a comeback. Shang Wanwan kept persuading herself in her heart. I can do it, I definitely can. She had made thorough preparations for today, and there was no way she would fail. It was already noon, and the sky was clear and cloudless. The scorching sun shone down. And at this moment, Shang Wanwan became the focus of countless people's attention. Finally, she slowly reached out and reached for the Tianling scepter, buzz. When it was still half an arm away from the Heaven's Order scepter, a buzzing sound suddenly spread out from it. The Tianling scepter, which was covered in a layer of faint light, suddenly released a powerful aura. Shang Wanwan was the first to bear the brunt of it, and she immediately took a step back from the impact. She was shocked and quickly stabilized her body. Her feet were nailed to the ground. Fortunately, she reacted in time, and the impact this time did not affect her too much. But in the end, under everyone's watchful eyes, he still took a step back. For a time, the huge square became even quieter. One had to know that at this moment, Shang Wanwan's performance was seen by countless people. Elder Chen Ku, who was singing the ceremony, also frowned slightly. He was the most senior of the royal family elders, a true veteran of 3 dynasties. He had seen such an occasion 3 times, and this was already the 4th time. In his impression, the first 3 enthronement ceremonies had gone very smoothly. As the symbol of imperial power, the Tianling scepter was a sacred item that the entire dynasty worshipped. It also had spirituality. In the past, during the process of holding the scepter, the Tianling scepter would naturally emit a powerful aura, but it would only do so when the successor tried to pick it up from the black crystal. However, just now, Shang Wanwan's hand had not even touched the Tianling scepter, and it had already caused such a commotion. Elder Chen Ku felt uneasy and felt that something was amiss. Shang Wanwan thought to herself that it was a close call. She almost fell down just now. However, the Tianling scepter seemed to be more difficult to control than expected. Just getting close to it was already so difficult. Who knew how difficult it would be to try to lift it? She pursed her lips and channeled the force in her body to her right hand. Immediately after, she took another step forward. This time, she was even more cautious than before. She used her force to wrap her hand completely and reached for the Tianling scepter. Buzz! The Tianling scepter trembled slightly. The commotion was even greater. Fortunately, Shang Wanwan had suffered a loss previously. This time, she clenched her teeth and decided to endure it. The closer she got, the stronger the aura became. Her entire right hand felt like it was about to be crushed. Shang Wanwan's face was pale, and her hand was trembling slightly. However, she still resolutely moved forward. Today, no matter what, she had to succeed. Elder Chen Ku watched from the side, and the feeling that something was wrong grew stronger. Strange. Why did the Tianling scepter seem to be very resistant to Shang Wanwan? He had never seen such a situation before. He frowned anxiously. It wouldn't be good if this went on. It would be extremely difficult for Shang Wanwan to pick it up. The other elders from the royal family who were standing nearby also sensed something. They looked at each other in unison and secretly exchanged glances. Logically speaking, Shang Wanwan had royal blood running through her veins. Her talent and strength were also not bad. She should be able to succeed smoothly. However, judging from the current situation, it seemed that Jianghu stood behind Shang Wanwan, only 10 steps away from her. Although he couldn't see Shang Wanwan's expression from here, he could already tell many things from her reaction. His heart was also in his mouth. Everyone at the bottom of the stairs watched this scene nervously. Chu Luiyue looked up slightly. From here, he could see half of Shang Wanwan's face. Her expression wasn't very good. It seemed that lifting the Tianling scepter wasn't that easy for her. Finally, after a long and painful torture, Shang Wanwan's hand finally reached into the layer of light and grabbed the Tianling scepter. In an instant, a bone-chilling aura surged out from within. Shang Wanwan clearly saw that her entire right hand was instantly covered in frost. Moreover, that layer of ice seemed to be spreading outwards. She was shocked and hurriedly circulated her force to block that icy aura outside. However, her right hand was already red and swollen from the cold. She couldn't feel anything at all. The Heavenly Order scepter was forged by the great ancestor using the 1,000-year-old ice bone wood from the extreme cold of the northern border. This kind of 1,000-year ice bone wood wasn't a real tree. It was formed by condensing the force of heaven and earth and freezing into a tree-like stalactite. It was rumored that it would only grow an inch every 100 years. One could only imagine how terrifying the energy it contained was. Shang Wanwan only felt that the chill seemed to have silently spread from her palm to her entire body. For a moment, she almost thought that she was going to become an ice sculpture. She knew that she had to pick it up as soon as possible. Otherwise, if this torture continued, she was afraid that her entire body would be crippled. Thinking of this, Shang Wanwan gritted her teeth and circulated all the force in her body. She gripped the Tianling scepter tightly and exerted force. "Rise!" Shang Wanwan shouted clearly. However, she was shocked to find that the Tianling scepter didn't move at all. It was still quietly floating above the black crystal. No matter how she controlled the abundant origin power to attack it, it didn't move at all. In front of Lang Kuan Palace, everyone who was nervously watching this scene was stunned. Someone quietly said, "Did this fail? Is this a failure?" A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 869. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. This whisper was especially clear. Instantly, it was like a drop of water falling into a pot of oil. The crowd started to stir, and many people looked at each other. This did seem to be a little strange. Looking at Shang Wanwan's appearance, she should have used all her strength. But the Tianling scepter did not move at all. It can't be. Isn't the third princess a 7th-level fighter? Logically speaking, she should be able to do it. But the Tianling scepter did not move. If the third princess really can't do it today, it will be too embarrassing. The low voices of discussion reached Shang Wanwan's ears, and every word made her feel even more embarrassed and tormented. She clenched her teeth and tried again. But the Tianling scepter still showed no signs of moving. The noise below gradually grew louder. The few elders of the imperial family beside him also gradually had a trace of suspicion on their faces. Shang Wanwan's heart beat violently, as if it was going to jump out of her chest. In a short time, her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. The Tianling scepter in her hand was bone-chillingly cold, but it was not as cold as her heart now. It was as if a basin of ice water was poured over her head. She couldn't help but shudder. She started to tremble. Why was the Tianling scepter not moving? She had risked her life to restore her Yuan meridian. Although it was not the best, it was still at the level of the earth scripture. In addition, she had painstakingly accumulated this strength. How could she not be able to lift the Tianling scepter? Shang Wanwan became more and more anxious. But the more anxious she was, the more flustered she became. She wanted to gather all the strength in her body and try again, but for some reason, her limbs went soft, and she could not exert any strength. But she did not dare to let go. That would be admitting that she could not do it. So, Shang Wanwan held the Tianling scepter and did not move. Actually, she had been trying to move, but to no avail. So in the eyes of the surrounding people, it looked like she was standing there stiffly. Time seemed to pass very slowly at this moment. The few elders from the imperial family looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. The gentle smile on Jiang Yuqing's face could no longer be maintained. If Shang Wanwan was unable to pick up the scepter today, she would not be able to ascend the throne. More importantly, she would never have the chance to try a second time. In that case, he would also be greatly implicated. At that time, all the previous efforts would be in vain. He no longer had the chance to find a third royal princess to marry. Don't be nervous. Take it slow. Jianghu finally couldn't help but open his mouth. At first glance, his expression seemed quite calm, but if one looked closely, they would see the anxiety and worry in his eyes. Shang Wanwan looked back at him. She knew very well that Jianghu wasn't encouraging her, but warning her. If she fails. At the thought of the terrifying consequences, Shang Wanwan pursed her lips and looked at the Tianling scepter in front of her again. With his current strength, he was afraid that it would be impossible. Then, Senior, could you please help me? Shang Wanwan asked in her heart. After a moment, that cold and indifferent voice sounded. Just as I thought, although your Yuan meridian has recovered, it's still lacking something. After all, your Yuan meridian's grade was not very good to begin with, and after it was destroyed by the flames of the Tianjing Yuan meridian, it was even worse. It was already very difficult for you to recover to your current state. The voice was very calm when he said these words, as if he was narrating a very ordinary matter. But in Shang Wanwan's ears, it didn't sound like that at all. She felt that he was mocking her. A deep resentment grew in her heart. If not for Shang Wanyu, she wouldn't be in such a difficult position now. Your Highness, do you still want to continue? Seeing that Shang Wanwan didn't move, Elder Chenku finally couldn't help but ask carefully. The moment he said that, everyone quieted down again and looked at Shang Wanwan with different expressions. If she continued, she might not succeed, and she might even be mocked for being incompetent. But if she gave up just like that, it would mean that Shang Wanwan had completely failed. Not to mention ascending the throne, even if she lived as the third princess, her life might not be any better. Those who had failed before didn't have good endings. Shang Wanwan immediately said. Of course. Seeing how resolute she was, Elder Chenku wanted to say something but stopped. Actually, according to his past experience, Shang Wanwan was destined to fail. But since she wanted to continue, he couldn't say anything. Third princess, please. Elder Chenku's expression became much more serious. If Shang Wanwan still couldn't do it this time, then they really had to consider many things in the future. Shang Wanwan nodded slightly and frowned slightly. Senior. Suddenly, a chuckle sounded beside her ear. Then, Shang Wanwan felt a flash in front of her eyes. A vigorous aura suddenly erupted from her body. In an instant, like a river bursting its banks, an endless amount of force surged. A black rune appeared between Shang Wanwan's eyebrows and disappeared in an instant. Due to the special position she was standing in and the fact that the rune flashed too quickly, no one noticed it. Then, a storm seemed to be brewing in the depths of her eyes. Cold. Sinister. It was as if she had become a completely different person. Then, she clenched her fists and tried to raise the Tianling scepter again. Buzz. A roar sounded. It shone brightly. In the next moment, the Tianling scepter finally moved. Shang Wanwan's mouth twitched. It seemed to be small, but there was a hint of stiffness in it. The black crystal was instantly filled with colorful lights. And the Tianling scepter started to move slowly along with Shang Wanwan's movements. It moved, it moved. The Tianling scepter moved. Someone exclaimed in surprise. The crowd became noisy again. Almost everyone rushed to look, afraid that they would miss something. Seeing Shang Wanwan slowly pick up the Tianling scepter, the stone in Elder Chenku's heart was finally put down. The other elders also nodded and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Jiang Yuqing's tightly clenched fists in his sleeves relaxed a little. It's good that she succeeded, it's good that she succeeded. Many people's faces were filled with amazement. The Tianling scepter is really not easy to deal with. The third princess only succeeded after trying so many times. So it's considered a success, right? From now on, she will officially ascend to the throne. Boom. At this moment, a huge explosion suddenly sounded from the Tianling scepter. A terrifying wave spread in all directions. Shang Wanwan's eyes flashed with shock. Before she could react, an unparalleled aura came toward her. Shang Wanwan's body instantly flew backward. Bang! She fell heavily and rolled down the 9 flights of stairs. The crowd was in an uproar. However, at this moment, the Tianling scepter suddenly flew in a certain direction. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something. She looked up and saw the Tianling scepter flying toward her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 870. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The Tianling scepter was extremely fast, leaving a straight silver trail in the air. In an instant, it had already flown out of Lang Kuan Palace. It tore through the air and let out a sharp whistle. Chi! The sound of something breaking could be heard. Everyone looked over and was shocked to find that the barrier that Elder Chen Ku had set up had been easily pierced. One must know that Elder Chen Ku was an 8th-level pinnacle fighter. One could only imagine how strong the barrier's defensive power was. But in front of the Tianling scepter, it was like a thin piece of paper that was instantly pierced. Countless people looked up anxiously, their eyes following the Tianling scepter. It flew across the sky and headed straight for the crowd. An astonishing pressure spread out, and many people subconsciously retreated backward. Quick! Retreat! The power of the Tianling scepter was not something that they could easily withstand. Everyone was shocked and panicked. The few elders of the imperial family who were standing on the steps were also panicking when they saw this scene. Elder Chen Ku, what should we do? Should we think of a way to stop the Tianling scepter? Elder Chen Ku clenched his fists tightly and the wrinkles on his face seemed to have increased. Stop it? Easy for you to say. Even if the few of them joined forces, they might not be able to completely control the Tianling scepter. Furthermore, this thing seemed to have gone crazy for it to suddenly cause such a ruckus. He had witnessed 3 enthronement ceremonies but had never seen such a scene. But these were only thoughts in his heart. The situation was chaotic now. If they could not control it in time, the consequences would be unimaginable. Elder Chen Ku pondered for a moment and made a prompt decision, quick. Activate the black magnetite. The black magnetite was the black crystal that held the Tianling scepter. There was a top-grade Xian formation carved on it and it was specially used to suppress the Tianling scepter. Usually, the Xian formation on the black magnetite was activated and the Tianling scepter was in a state of deep sleep. Only during special times like this would they deactivate the Xian formation on the black magnetite. Once the heir to the imperial family successfully picked up the Tianling scepter and received its approval, the Xian formation on the black magnetite would be activated when it was placed back. But they did not expect that this time, they would have to do it. The elders hesitated for a moment. Once it was activated again, the black profound stone and the heaven-writ scepter would not be able to touch each other for a short period of time. At that time, the selection of a new emperor would have to be delayed. However, the heaven-writ scepter seemed to have slipped out of his control. Perhaps this was the only way. The few of them looked at each other and nodded resolutely. With a move of their bodies, they stood around the black mysterious stone and surrounded it. One of them stretched out his hand, and several rays of silver origin power flew out. Open. Wait. Elder Chen Ku suddenly cried out in alarm. The few elders quickly stopped and saw that Elder Chen Ku was looking in a certain direction with a shocked expression. They subconsciously looked over and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The originally orderly and lively crowd seemed to have been split from the middle by an invisible sharp sword. At the end of the crowd stood a woman in red. It was Chu Luiyue. However, the heavenly command scepter actually stopped a foot away from her. For a moment, time seemed to stop flowing, and the surrounding space froze inch by inch. Between heaven and earth, there was complete silence. Everyone stared at this scene with their mouths agape. Their hearts were filled with shock, and they were speechless. The heaven-writ scepter was extremely resistant to Shang Wanwan and had mercilessly sent her flying. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. What was the meaning of this? After a short moment of shock, someone finally remembered Sheng Wanwan and stiffly turned around to look. At this moment, Sheng Wanwan had already rolled down the 9 steps. Perhaps because the energy fluctuation she had encountered earlier was too strong, she had struggled for a long time before she could stand up. However, at this moment, she was really in a sorry state. There were several cuts on her face and hands, and she was bleeding profusely. Her originally exquisite and beautiful makeup was now completely ruined. Her veil had long been pulled down, and her cloud-like hair was messy. A luxurious phoenix hairpin hung crookedly in a lock of hair. It was unknown whether it was because she had suffered internal injuries, but her face looked incomparably pale. There were some black marks between her brows and the corners of her lips, making her look extremely strange. No one could have imagined that the third Princess Sheng Wanwan, who was still glamorous and lofty just a moment ago, would end up in such a state. Some people gradually regained their senses, and their expressions became very complicated. If they remembered correctly, Sheng Wanwan seemed to have been sent flying by the Heaven Writ Scepter's power just now, right? This was no longer a matter of whether she could pick up the Heaven Writ Scepter or not. This was a matter of enmity with the Heaven Writ Scepter. Although there had been chances of failure in the past, something like this had never happened before. As the third princess, Sheng Wanwan was a true Tianling royal bloodline. Such an action was no different from giving her a ruthless slap in front of so many people. Sheng Wanwan also felt extremely embarrassed. Her limbs were cold, and the blood in her body seemed to have frozen. Only her face was burning with pain. At this moment, everyone's gazes seemed to be filled with mockery and ridicule. Her mind kept replaying the scene just now, and she couldn't help but want to find a hole to hide in. Completely disappear. Wan, how are you? Jiang Yucheng reacted quickly and immediately walked over to Sheng Wanwan's side as he asked with furrowed brows. Sheng Wanwan was just about to speak when the blood in her chest surged, and she actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Jiang Yucheng was standing right beside her, and a lot of the blood splattered on him. His brows furrowed, but he still reached out to support Sheng Wanwan. Sheng Wanwan couldn't be bothered with him at this moment. After spitting out the blood, she still stubbornly and quickly raised her head to look at Chu Luiyue in the crowd. Why is the Heaven Writ Scepter? She spat out a few words with difficulty, her eyes staring straight ahead. The hatred in her eyes was like a knife, as if she wanted to cut Chu Luiyue into pieces. Jiang Yucheng also looked over with furrowed brows. How could he not be curious? In fact, at this very moment, everyone who saw this scene, both inside and outside of the huge Lang Kuan Hall, was similarly puzzled. When did Chu Luiyue have anything to do with the Tianling scepter? Why did it fly towards her out of nowhere? Especially when compared to Sheng Wanwan, this scene looked even more strange. Jiang Yucheng's expression was grave. This Tianling scepter is extremely dangerous. Be careful. Before he finished speaking, the Tianling scepter seemed to have understood. It suddenly retracted the murderous aura around it and moved forward. It seemed to be trying to curry favor and act coquettishly. It gently poked Chu Luiyue's face. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 871. Jiang Yucheng's remaining words were stuck in his throat, and he almost choked to death. The expression on his face changed. How exciting! When the crowd saw this scene, they didn't react any better than Jiang Yucheng. They were all stunned. What? What was going on? Wasn't the Tianling scepter supposed to be majestic and inviolable? Wasn't it supposed to be that only the one who raised the Tianling scepter could wield imperial power and ascend to the top? Why did it suddenly become like this? The Tianling scepter was very domineering just a moment ago, sending the third princess flying. In the next second, it actually, in front of Chu Luiyue, wasn't this too strange? The surroundings were extremely quiet. Countless pairs of eyes landed on Chu Luiyue with different expressions. Chu Luiyue was actually shocked herself. When she saw the Tianling scepter flying towards her, she had already guessed something in her heart. She just didn't expect it to treat her even more intimately than expected. Yes, intimately. When it flew in front of her and poked her face, the first thought that came to Chu Liuyue's mind was, the Tianling scepter seems to like her very much. This feeling came out of nowhere, but it was very real. Chu Liyue blinked and looked at the Tianling scepter in front of her. At this moment, it was still enveloped in a layer of faint light. However, because it was very close to her, she could roughly see what it looked like. It was a cylindrical scepter that was completely black. It was wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, and it was about 3 feet long. There seemed to be a dragon's head carved on the top, and the tail was sharper and seemed to be carved with some kind of pattern. Even though it had already restrained its aura, she could still vaguely feel the vast and majestic aura that seemed to come from an ancient time and space. Chu Liyue could clearly feel that the Tianling scepter was indeed coming for her. For a moment, an impulse surged in her heart, and she almost reached out to grab it. However, she didn't forget where she was, and she also didn't forget that there were countless pairs of eyes staring at her. Just as she was about to suppress the thoughts in her heart, a sharp voice filled with anger suddenly rang out. Chu Liyue! How dare you! This shout was extremely ear-piercing, and it instantly caused many people to be jolted awake. Chu Liyue also looked over. The person who spoke was Sheng Wanwan. At this moment, she was glaring at Chu Liyue furiously. Her eyes were wide open and she looked furious. The Tianling scepter is a sacred object that the Tianling dynasty has worshipped for thousands of years. It is the symbol of imperial power. How can I allow you to defile me like this? Many people's expressions instantly changed. As long as one wasn't blind, they could clearly see that the heaven's writ scepter had flown towards Chu Liyue of its own accord. It had also approached Chu Liyue of its own accord. From the beginning to the end, Chu Liyue stood in his position and did nothing. Sheng Wanwan said that she had defiled the heavenly writ scepter. Isn't that a bit of a distortion of the truth? Chu Liyue raised her brows slightly. Instead of being angry, she smiled and said softly, "Third princess, do you mean that I was the one who summoned the heaven's writ scepter and controlled it to do all those things just now?" Sheng Wanwan choked. If she said yes, wouldn't that mean that she had admitted that the heaven's writ scepter was controlled by a mere Chu Liyue? If word got out, wouldn't the imperial family lose face? But if she said that it wasn't the heaven's writ scepter, why did it suddenly become so strange? It had rejected her approach and even injured her directly. But in the blink of an eye, it was so docile in front of Chu Liyue. Even in the thousands of years of the Tianling dynasty's history, nothing like this had ever happened before. The most embarrassing thing was that the heaven's writ scepter was still quietly floating beside Chu Liyue. It was as if it was set on following her and had no intention of returning. She was going to pick up the heaven's writ scepter. What was she going to do now? Sheng Wanwan's heart was filled with hatred. Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue again. The night before, Jiang Yuqing poured out his heart to her and took the initiative to ask for her hand in marriage. Now, even the heaven's writ scepter had taken the initiative to follow him and stay by his side. Who knows if you use some kind of trick? Sheng Wanwan was almost blinded by anger. She pointed at Chu Liyue and wanted to scold her, but Jiang Yuqing quickly stopped her. Calm down. He grabbed Sheng Wanwan's hand tightly and gave her a warning look. She should take a look at herself first. If she lost control of her emotions again and made a scene, it would be over. Sheng Wanwan bit her lip hard to control her emotions. Jiang Yuqing looked deeply at Chu Liyue and the heaven's writ scepter in front of her. His mind was also in a mess. Elder Chen Ku. He called out. You have always been in charge of looking after the heaven's writ scepter. Do you know what is going on? Elder Chen Ku, who was called out, immediately walked over with a worried expression. This humble subject doesn't know what is going on either. The heaven's writ scepter rarely leaves the black mystic stone. You are the leader of the 8 great elders of the royal family and are personally in charge of these matters. If even you don't know, then who else can? Jiang Yuqing's tone turned cold. No matter what, you must bring the heaven's writ scepter back. If you delay the third princess's ascension ceremony, you will be held accountable. Elder Jianghu also cried out in his heart. What did this have to do with him? Not to mention that the heaven's writ scepter had taken the initiative to look for Chu Luiyue and no one could do anything about it. Even if Chu Luiyue wasn't here, would Shang Wanwan be able to lift it? Everything that had happened just now was still vivid in his mind. The heaven's writ scepter was full of resistance towards Shang Wanwan and wasn't even willing to let her touch it. Not to mention anything else. It would even delay her ascension ceremony. That would require her to have the ability to ascend the throne. Without the heaven's writ scepter's approval, today's ceremony couldn't possibly continue. Elder Jianghu's expression turned a little pale at this thought. Prince Consort, it's true that we are in charge of guarding the heaven's writ scepter, but we have never been able to control it. Please forgive my incompetence, but I may not be able to do as you say. Jiang Yuqing immediately became anxious. Shang Wanwan was even angrier when she heard this. She immediately raised her voice and pointed at Chu Luiyue. No matter what, you must bring the heaven's writ scepter back to the black mystic stone. Otherwise, how can I continue? Elder Jianghu clasped his hands together and bowed. He said word by word, he said each word clearly, Third Princess, you know that the heaven's writ scepter is a sacred item that has been passed down for thousands of years and has its own spirituality. If it acknowledges you, it will naturally agree to your request. No matter where it is, you will be able to lift it. It doesn't have to be on the black mystic stone. However, if it doesn't acknowledge you, then even we can't do anything about it. Shang Wanwan's face flushed red. Was he openly saying that she didn't have the right to inherit the throne? She clenched her fists and looked at Chu Luiyue. I order you to return the heaven's command scepter immediately. I order you to return the heaven's command scepter immediately. Chapter 872. This scene was simply too absurd and laughable. Shang Wanwan was clearly the one with the royal bloodline and the heir to the throne, but now she was coldly reprimanding Chu Luiyue, who had nothing to do with her, and demanding that she return the Tianling scepter. If word got out, who knew how many people would laugh their heads off? Chu Luiyue was calm and composed as she lifted her chin. Third Princess, I did not take the Tianling scepter for myself, so how can I return it? If you want it back, why don't you come and get it yourself? Shang Wanwan choked as her face flushed red. If it was really as easy as Chu Luiyue said, why would she have such a headache? This Tianling scepter was indeed a little strange. It had been very resistant to her from the start. Just now, when she asked the senior for help, she was directly blasted out and rolled down the 9 steps in front of everyone. Now, she did not dare to try again. She did not dare to imagine what would happen if the same thing happened a second time. But if she did not do anything, what would she do if the Tianling scepter really did not return? At this moment, it was still quietly floating in front of Chu Luiyue, as if it had become an item that she carried around with her. Jiang Yuqing gently pushed her. You are of royal bloodline after all. No matter what, the Tianling scepter should not do anything to you. You can go and ask for it yourself. Shang Wanwan suddenly turned around and glared at him. Will not do anything to me? Did he not see the situation just now? She had already embarrassed herself once. If she failed again, she would lose all her face. But Jiang Yuqing's attitude was very firm. Aside from Shang Wanwan, who else could take the initiative to help? Elder Jianghu and the others were in charge of guarding the entire Lanquan Palace and controlling the Xian array on the black magnetite. But they had clearly said that the Tianling scepter could not be controlled. Could it be that they were just going to watch? Shang Wanwan gritted her teeth. Unable to persuade Jiang Yuqing, she could only take a step forward. She took a deep breath, looked at the oracle scepter, and tried to make her tone sound sincere. Junior Shang Wanwan respectfully requests the return of the heaven's writ scepter. As he spoke, the Tianling scepter remained motionless, as if it had no reaction at all. It had a certain level of intelligence, so naturally, it could understand Sheng Wanwan's words. As a result, the situation instantly became even more awkward. The onlookers quieted down with different expressions on their faces. The heavenly writ scepter brushed him aside in disdain and ignored his request. After so many years, it seemed that Sheng Wanwan was the only one, right? In this awkward silence, even the air seemed to have frozen. Sheng Wanwan's face quickly turned red, and then turned pale. Her body trembled slightly. He didn't know if it was because he was too angry or because he was too ashamed. In any case, at this moment, Sheng Wanwan deeply understood what it meant to be ashamed and unable to show her face. At this moment, Chu Liuyue's clear voice sounded, breaking the dead silence. "Hey, the third princess is inviting you back." Chu Liyue was speaking to the Tianling scepter. Although she also wanted to directly take the Tianling scepter in her hands, it didn't seem appropriate at this moment. The Tianling scepter finally moved after hearing her words. The fluorescent light around it flickered, as if it was breathing. Then, it actually flew directly to Chu Liyue's side, and then, struck the ground. Thud. The end of the scepter landed on the white jade stone, making a soft sound. It was actually standing right beside Chu Liyue's leg, just a fist's distance away. As long as Chu Liyue stretched out his hand, he would be able to take it in his hand. Chu Liyue looked down, and the corners of his eyes twitched. Was he afraid that the matter wasn't big enough? This seemed to be even more hurtful than her directly snatching it. There was nothing more embarrassing than this. The contrast was so stark and intense that it was impossible to ignore it. On one side, Sheng Wanwan was pleading with the Tianling scepter to return, but the Tianling scepter ignored her. On the other side, Chu Liyue was persuading the Tianling scepter to leave, but the Tianling scepter insisted on staying by her side. Everyone could see clearly that the Tianling scepter wanted to stay by Chu Liyue's side. The two ladies faced each other in the hall, and the atmosphere was strange. No one would have thought that something like this would happen during the coronation ceremony. Sheng Wanwan stared deadly at Chu Liyue. No. There must be something wrong here. There were so many people present, so why did the Tianling scepter choose Chu Liyue? She wouldn't believe that she didn't have any tricks up her sleeves. Chu Liyue. What do you want? The Tianling scepter is the sacred item of the entire dynasty. Even if you want to play tricks, you should know your limits. How can you think of something like this? Sheng Wanwan clenched her fists and reprimanded her. It's fine that you snatched the divine beast back then, but now, you won't even let go of the Tianling scepter left behind by the Taizu of the Shengwan family? You're too much. As soon as he said this, everyone was stunned. What did Sheng Wanwan say? Snatch the divine beast? What was going on? Could it be that Chu Liyue snatched the divine beast that originally belonged to her? Chu Liyue's expression also calmed down. She looked at Sheng Wanwan with a faint smile, and there seemed to be a cold glint in her eyes. What do you mean by that, third princess? Why don't I understand? Sheng Wanwan sneered. Back then, I went to the Dahuang swamp for imperial father. In the mystic forest, I happened to meet a demonic beast that was about to break through to the divine beast level. Unfortunately, there was a barrier outside and guards, so I couldn't get close. When I was fighting with that person, you took the opportunity to enter and contract with the demonic beast while it was going through the Tianlai tribulation. Many people have seen this. Do you still want to deny it? You snatched the divine beast, but I didn't pursue the matter because you were willing to use the divine beast's blood to treat imperial father. Being able to contract with that divine beast is also your ability. But this time, you still want to use tricks to snatch the Tianling scepter. I won't allow it. Everyone was in an uproar. They had long heard that Chu Liyue had returned after contracting with a divine beast, but they didn't know that there were so many twists and turns in this matter. If what Sheng Wanwan said was true, then Chu Liyue's actions were indeed not honorable. Seeing that the surrounding people seemed to be gradually siding with her, Sheng Wanwan finally felt a little better. She let out a long sigh and said, I know that you come from a lowly background, so it's inevitable that you'll be greedy when you see something good. Whatever you want, I've already tried my best to satisfy you. I even gave up this divine beast to you. But you're still not satisfied. If you want something, you have to do it in an upright manner. Every time you use such despicable thoughts and methods, even if you get it, it won't truly belong to you. And you, how can you be at ease? Sheng Wanwan was certain that Chu Luiyue had used some tricks to make the Tianling scepter go crazy. Therefore, her words were very rude, mocking her both openly and secretly. When the surrounding people heard this, many of them also had doubts in their eyes. That's right. No matter how capable Chu Luiyue was, this Tianling scepter couldn't have gone looking for her for no reason. Could it be that she really did something in secret? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 873. Chu Luiyue listened to her patiently. However, she didn't show any shame or disdain for being exposed. Instead, she smiled. She hadn't even told Sheng Wanwan these words, but the other party had already made the accusation. Her ability to distort the truth was not lost at all. It seems that in the third princess's eyes, I'm really someone who knows everything. Not only can I contract divine beasts as I wish, but I can also use the Tianling scepter as I wish. She spoke coldly, and a smile suddenly appeared on her lips. Since the third princess thinks so highly of me, wouldn't I be letting down the third princess's good intentions if I don't do anything? Sheng Wanwan was originally quite pleased with herself. She thought that she had the upper hand and would force Chu Luiyue to back down. However, she felt uneasy after hearing what Lin Mingye said. Wasn't Chu Luiyue saying that she was belittling the Tianling scepter? I didn't mean it that way. Elder Chenku, there's something I'd like to ask. Chu Luiyue ignored Sheng Wanwan and turned to look at Elder Chenku. What? Elder Chenku didn't expect Chu Luiyue to suddenly speak to him and was stunned. Chu Luiyue glanced at the Tianling scepter beside her, and her red lips curved up into a deep smile. Just as the third princess said, the Tianling scepter is a sacred item of the Tianling dynasty. It's extremely honorable. It's rumored that whoever can pick up the Tianling scepter will successfully inherit the throne. What if I can do it? Elder Chenku's eyes widened in shock. Was Chu Luiyue crazy? Did she know what she was saying? Picking up the Tianling scepter, was she planning to openly usurp the throne? Impossible. Before Elder Chenku could react, Sheng Wanwan was the first to deny it. Even if you use some method to make the Tianling scepter lose control, you can't pick it up, much less gain its approval. Sheng Wanwan said this with great confidence. This was because the Tianling scepter had been left behind by Taizu. Since ancient times, only those with the Tianling royal bloodline could approach and obtain the Tianling scepter's recognition. What kind of background did Chu Luiyue have to have such thoughts? What wishful thinking. Oh. Why don't we make a bet? Chu Luiyue was not annoyed and shrugged. Sheng Wanwan became vigilant. What bet? If I can pick up this scepter and obtain its approval, then, don't even think about it. Sheng Wanwan immediately interrupted her rudely. Chu Luiyue, with your background, do you think you can be related to the Tianling royal family? Don't even think about it. If Chu Luiyue dared to say that she wanted to use this to fight for the throne, she would immediately send people to arrest Chu Luiyue and sentence her to death for the crime of rebellion. Chu Luiyue chuckled. Third princess, why are you in such a hurry? I haven't finished. What I want to bet is that if I can do this, then please reinvestigate the death of the crown princess. There was a loud bang. Chu Luiyue's words were like thunder, exploding in everyone's ears. Countless people widened their eyes in shock and looked at her in disbelief. What did Chu Luiyue just say? She wanted to reinvestigate the death of the crown princess? What did that mean? Didn't the crown princess die because she went crazy during her cultivation? Reinvestigate? Could it be that there was something fishy about the death of the crown princess? There were actually many people who had doubts about this matter, but in the past 2 years, they had all stopped investigating because of various reasons. Gradually, no one mentioned this matter anymore. There were even some people who didn't know why, but they kept everything about the crown princess a secret. The woman who was once as dazzling as the sun in the clouds finally fell like a meteor, completely disappearing and returning to silence. Very few people mentioned her again. When Chu Luiyue said that she wanted to bet, many people guessed that she would ask for something. But no matter how much they thought about it, they didn't expect that she was talking about this matter. Shang Guanwan was also stunned. For a moment, she almost thought that she had heard wrong. What did you say? Chu Luiyue slowly repeated what she had just said. What, third princess is unwilling? Do you know what you are saying? Jiang Yuqing finally reacted at this time. His face was covered in frost, and his brows were tightly knitted as he asked coldly. Back then, the crown princess passed away, and everything was already concluded. Now, you say that you want to reinvestigate. Could it be that you don't trust us? No matter how much he liked Chu Luiyue, he couldn't help it when he heard her say this. Small quarrels were harmless. Even if Chu Luiyue mocked and ridiculed Shang Guanwan, he wouldn't mind too much. However, when it involved the empress concubine, he couldn't show any mercy. Chu Luiyue didn't seem to hear the threat in his words and nodded honestly. That's right, I just don't trust you. Jiang Yuqing suddenly choked. After a while, he said, this matter is very important. How can we just let you say whatever you want? Isn't there the Tianling scepter? Chu Luiyue blinked and smiled. Could it be that the extremely noble Tianling scepter can't be exchanged for a chance to reinvestigate the crown princess's death? Chu Luiyue's words were too tricky. No one dared to say no. The crown princess's status was indeed noble and her reputation was extremely high. But compared to the Tianling scepter, she was still inferior. If she dared to say anything bad about the Tianling scepter, wouldn't she be slandering Taizu? Jiang Yuqing could only change his words. It's not that you can't, but if you insist, you have to at least produce evidence to prove that there was a mistake back then. There is indeed a problem with the crown princess's death. Otherwise, we definitely won't agree to this matter. Back then, they did it flawlessly and didn't leave behind any evidence. No matter why Chu Luiyue was suddenly involved in this matter, it was impossible to find any clues, let alone the truth of that year. However, when Chu Luiyue heard this, she nodded in an extremely relaxed manner. All right. As long as you agree to my conditions, I can produce evidence today. I hope that when the time comes, the third princess and prince consort won't go back on their words. Seeing Chu Luiyue's confident appearance, Jiang Yuqing's heart suddenly thumped and he felt a bit uneasy. Chu Luiyue definitely didn't have nothing better to do to make such a fuss in front of so many people. She was so determined. Could it be that this consort agrees to your conditions? Without waiting for him to refuse, Shang Guanwan had already agreed. If you can pick up the Tianling scepter and obtain its approval, this consort will agree to let you investigate again. However, if you can't do it, then take your own life to atone for your crimes. Respect the Tianling scepter. How about it? Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Luiyue only wanted to investigate the crown princess's death, but Shang Guanwan was planning to kill Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue lifted her chin slightly and smiled slowly. Her gaze was as sharp as a blade. All right. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 874. No one had expected things to develop to this stage. Chu Luiyue had actually gambled with her own life in exchange for a chance to investigate the crown princess's death. After a short silence, the crowd broke out into a commotion. Is Chu Luiyue crazy? What is she thinking? She's willing to pay any price to investigate the crown princess's death? Didn't she come from a small place outside Heaven's Canopy? How did she get involved with the crown princess? I can't figure it out. I really can't figure it out. In these 2 years, there were also people who wanted to do this, but they all gave up in the end. Isn't she just finding trouble for herself? What can she do by herself? Aren't you all curious as to why Chu Luiyue dared to make such a claim? Looking at the Tianling scepter's attitude towards her, I think she might be able to do it. Since when was someone without the Tianling royal bloodline able to do such a thing? This was actually the question that everyone was most curious about. No matter how they thought about it, the Tianling scepter shouldn't have anything to do with Chu Luiyue, right? Jiang Yuqing also heard a lot of these whispers. He looked at Chu Luiyue and those familiar eyes, and an extremely absurd thought suddenly appeared in his mind. However, he immediately shook his head forcefully and dismissed the idea. Impossible. Shang Guanyu had already been raped to death back then, and her soul had already dissipated. It was impossible for her to still be alive. At that time, he had repeatedly confirmed that there was no mistake. But no matter how much he tried to convince himself, there was still a doubtful voice that didn't dissipate. If Chu Luiyue really had nothing to do with Shang Guanyu, then why would she get involved in this matter? Also, the Tianling scepter didn't care about so many people, even Shang Guanwan, a proper royal princess, but it treated Chu Luiyue differently. He finally could not help but look at Mu Qinghe, who was not far away, only to see that he was also looking at Chu Luiyue with a shocked and confused expression. As the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry, he was personally in charge of the security inside and outside the palace. Lang Kuan Hall was the most important, so he had always been guarding it. Jiang Yuqing frowned. Chu Luiyue was personally brought back by Mu Qinghe. When he first met Chu Luiyue, he was suspicious of her and asked Mu Qinghe to secretly investigate her. The result of the investigation was that there was no problem with Chu Luiyue's identity. She was indeed the abandoned daughter of a declining family that grew up in country Yaochen. By chance, she changed her fate and finally arrived at West Hill after going through many difficulties. But now, what was going on? Jiang Yuqing was getting more and more nervous. He felt that things were getting out of his control and were heading in an unknown direction. Even he was not sure what would happen in the end. However, at this moment, Jiang Yuqing was not the only one who was shocked. Mu Qinghe stared at Chu Luiyue, who was not far away. When he heard her words, he was also shocked. She wants to investigate the death of the princess? Who exactly is she? At this moment, Hongyao also flew out. Looking at its green wings, it seemed to be a little agitated, and its pair of round eyes stared closely at Chu Luiyue on the other side. It was unknown if it was waiting or hoping for something. A thought suddenly popped up in Mu Qinghe's mind, and his body stiffened. His lips moved slightly as he called Hongyao back. Hongyao. Hearing that something was wrong with his voice, Hongyao finally turned around to take a look. There seemed to be endless undercurrents surging in Mu Qinghe's eyes. Who is she? Everyone's gaze was focused on Chu Luiyue at this point. She lowered her head and glanced at the Tianling scepter. She didn't want to be so ostentatious, but since it gave her so much face, then, there was no need to be polite. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue's gaze focused, and she reached out to the dragon head carved at the top. Actually, the Tianling scepter was right beside her, within reach. Therefore, Chu Luiyue only moved her arm, and her fingers were already on the Tianling scepter. Everyone subconsciously held their breaths and were extremely nervous as they stared intently. Buzz. The expected resistance and rejection did not happen. The moment Chu Luiyue's hand officially held the Tianling scepter, a buzzing sound rang out. At the same time, the sparkling radiance on it quickly gathered and finally gathered at the eyes of the dragon head. Swoosh. The dragon's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. A golden ray of light shot out from within. It shot straight into the clouds. In an instant, the light shone brightly. It illuminated the world. The sacred light scattered and enveloped Chu Luiyue. The wind whistled, and her clothes fluttered. Her black hair fluttered. At a glance, it was incomparably noble. At this moment, Chu Luiyue only felt that the force in her body seemed to have been guided by something, and it quickly surged. It was almost boiling. It was as if something that originally belonged to her had finally returned. It was a perfect fit. Almost instinctively, she held the scepter and raised it high. In the sky, clouds quickly gathered. With the golden light from the Tianling scepter as the center, a huge storm quickly gathered. It covered the sky and covered the sun. It was majestic. The next moment, Chu Luiyue waved her wrist lightly. A majestic aura, wrapped in a biting cold murderous intent, rushed straight toward Sheng Wanwan. Sheng Wanwan was shocked and immediately wanted to retreat. But how could her speed compare to the attack of the Tianling scepter? Boom! That terrifying power flew past her left shoulder, instantly slicing off a large piece of flesh on her shoulder. Ah! Sheng Wanwan cried out in shock and flew backward, then fell hard onto the ground. Pfft! She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Her back and left shoulder were in pain, and a few of her ribs seemed to have been broken. Her internal organs felt like they were squeezed into a ball, and it was so uncomfortable that it felt like it was going to explode. She struggled to get up, full of resentment. Just as she was about to scold Chu Luiyue, she suddenly heard a cold gasp from the crowd. Sheng Wanwan immediately felt that something was wrong. Looking at the crowd, she instantly saw countless pairs of frightened and disgusted eyes. They were looking at her. Sheng Wanwan suddenly realized that something was wrong, and only then did she realize that her face was burning with pain. She knew that something was wrong and immediately touched her face. It was rough and sticky to the touch, and it was extremely terrifying. Her mask had actually fallen off. Digression will continue tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 875. Sheng Wanwan's heart was instantly filled with endless panic and fear. She screamed and immediately covered her face with her hands. However, everyone had already seen it clearly while she was in a daze. That originally beautiful face had suddenly become extremely ugly with scars all over it. From afar, it looked like centipedes were covering her face. It was frightening. The surrounding crowd instantly fell into a strange silence. Many people looked at each other in confusion. It was no wonder that the third princess had refused to leave Huayang Palace after returning from Dahuang Swamp. After a long time, more and more people came to see her, and the matters that she had to deal with personally became more and more troublesome. Only then did she begin to see people again. However, under most circumstances, she still wouldn't leave the palace. Everyone thought that she had really gotten injured because of His Majesty and needed to rest in bed. However, they didn't know that this was the reason behind it. Her appearance had been completely ruined. Feeling countless gazes on her, Sheng Wanwan was filled with hatred, anger, and resentment. Even though she had already gotten the divine beast blood from Chu Luiyue and the injuries on her face had started to improve, she hadn't fully recovered yet because she had just applied the medicine. The deep and shallow scars were much better than when her face was constantly festering, but in the eyes of the crowd, they were still extremely terrifying. Sheng Wanwan trembled all over. She wanted nothing more than to disappear from this place immediately. The surroundings were extremely quiet, but it made her feel extremely tormented. Your Highness. When Chan Yi, who was standing behind, saw this situation, she was the first to react. She hurriedly rushed forward, wanting to help Sheng Wanwan up. Get lost. Sheng Wanwan pushed Chan Yi away. At this moment, everyone was just laughing at her. She simply struggled to stand up. From the corner of her eye, she saw the tattered mask that had fallen to the ground. However, it was only a thin layer. It was stained with dust and blood, and looked extremely dirty. It was as if her face had been torn off and trampled on. She slowly raised her head and looked at Chu Luiyue. Her eyes were filled with hatred, as if she wanted nothing more than to eat his flesh and drink his blood. You did it on purpose. Sheng Wanwan's every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between her teeth, carrying a deep anger and resentment. There were only a few people who knew that her looks had been disfigured. Chu Luiyue had obviously done this to embarrass her in front of everyone. Chu Luiyue looked at her with an apologetic expression. "Ah, third princess, I'm really sorry. My hand slipped just now. Are you all right?" Hand slipped. Once? Shang Wanwan was so angry that she almost laughed. She had really underestimated Chu Luiyue. He could even make up such a reason. Chu Luiyue held the Tianling scepter in her hand. There were so many people present, so why did it hit her? Furthermore, he had even removed her mask. If he didn't do it on purpose, Shang Wanwan wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. "You bitch." Just as Shang Wanwan was about to scold him, Jiang Yucheng, who was beside her, immediately spoke up and forcefully interrupted her. He walked over with a solemn face. "You're injured. It's better to have your injuries checked first. Leave the rest to me." Shang Wanwan was already mad with anger. If she was allowed to continue, who knew what would happen? "Magistrate Zhua." He shouted at Zhua Mingxi. Zhua Mingxi hurried forward. "I'll leave third princess's injuries to you." "Yes." Zhua Mingxi responded and took out a pill. "Your Highness, please take this medicine first." Looking at her, not to mention her external injuries, her internal injuries were also quite serious. Shang Wanwan was about to shake off Jiang Yucheng's hand when she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her body. Her face suddenly paled, and cold sweat dripped down with a schwa sound. Jiang Yucheng took the medicine. Take the medicine first." Shang Wanwan raised her head with difficulty and glanced at him. There wasn't the slightest bit of heartache in his eyes. There was only coldness and indifference, as well as a hint of warning. That was a warning to her not to cause trouble at this time. Shang Wanwan's heart suddenly felt sour. Although she already knew that he didn't have any feelings for her, she was injured at this time. Her scars were exposed in front of so many people. She had no face left. He still wasn't moved in the slightest. Ever since she made a scene with him yesterday, he wasn't even willing to act anymore. He wasn't the least bit worried that she would be mocked and ridiculed after today. The despair in Shang Wanwan's heart surged like a tide and gradually drowned her. Jiang Yucheng fed her the pill. She opened her mouth mechanically and swallowed it. Then, under Jiang Yucheng's signal, Chani and Zhua Mingxi stepped forward to check her injuries. After taking her pulse, Zhua Mingxi was shocked. There seemed to be two forces crazily fighting inside Shang Wanwan's body. If it wasn't resolved quickly, it would be dangerous. "Your Highness, your injuries are more serious. Why don't you go and treat them first?" Zhua Mingxi said carefully. Shang Wanwan directly refused. She gritted her teeth and stared at Chu Luiyue. This consort isn't leaving. Today was her wedding day and also the day of her coronation ceremony. She was the main character today. Why should she leave? The coronation ceremony hadn't even started yet. Why should she leave? She wanted to see what kind of waves Chu Luiyue could stir up today. Zhua Mingxi looked at Jiang Yucheng for help. Jiang Yucheng didn't force her. It was fine as long as Shang Wanwan knew how powerful she was. If she really left, the situation today would be even worse. He nodded. "Take good care of the third princess." With that, he turned around and looked at Chu Luiyue. His face no longer had the gentle smile from the beginning of the wedding. Now, it was cold and there was even some anger in his eyes. "Chu Luiyue, do you know what kind of crime it is to intentionally hurt the third princess?" Even he thought that Chu Luiyue's attack just now was intentional. Chu Luiyue sighed softly and glanced at the Tianling scepter in her hand. At this time, the golden pillar of light that pierced through the clouds had gradually dissipated. Only the pair of dragon eyes were still shining with a resplendent light. They were bright, dazzling, and full of power. How could she explain so that they would believe that she really didn't do it on purpose just now, but that the Tianling scepter did it on its own? At that time, it was in the midst of awakening and its aura was erupting. Before she could react, it had already launched that attack at Sheng Wanwan. In her opinion, that attack was more like a warning than an attack. Otherwise, Sheng Wanwan's injuries wouldn't have stopped there. Thinking of this, she narrowed her eyes and looked at Sheng Wanwan. To be honest, it was the Heaven's Writ Scepter that made its move just now, said the Heaven's Writ Scepter. Chapter 876. You're spouting nonsense. When Sheng Wanwan heard this, she immediately retorted. Why would the Tianling scepter do this for no reason? I'm of the Tianling royal family's bloodline. Even if someone had tried to pick up the Tianling scepter and failed, they had never heard of the Tianling scepter attacking anyone of its own accord. Chu Liuyue's words were simply too laughable. That's right. With your status, what exactly did you do to provoke the Tianling scepter to do this? Chu Liyue smiled faintly and asked in return. If I remember correctly, when you tried to pick up the Tianling scepter just now, it seemed to have resisted you a little. Sheng Wanwan was about to go on a crusade against Chu Liyue, but when she heard this, she instantly choked. The rest of her words were stuck in her throat. It was extremely uncomfortable, but she couldn't say it no matter what. She instantly felt guilty, and her eyes darted around. Actually, she had also realized this problem. The Tianling scepter had been very rude to her from the start, and it had no intention of submitting to her. Later on, when she asked for help from the senior, it had directly exploded and sent her flying. Could it be because of this? She was in a fit of anger just now, so she didn't care and scolded it. But now, Chu Liuyue's words made her uncertain again. If it was really because of this, she clenched her teeth and braced herself. I don't know what you're talking about. The surrounding people's expressions all became a little strange. Chu Liuyue's words weren't without reason. From the moment Sheng Wanwan tried to pick up the Tianling scepter, everything had been going wrong. Something didn't seem right. Even if she couldn't pick it up and didn't receive the Tianling scepter's acknowledgement, she shouldn't have been knocked down from the top and rolled down the 9 steps, right? Could it really be that there was something wrong with Sheng Wanwan? Why you? Don't try to absolve yourself of the blame. You clearly know this consort's face. Back then, this consort became like this because your demonic beast scratched me. Now that you're treating this consort like this in public, aren't you just trying to embarrass this consort? When Sheng Wanwan saw that the situation was not right, she immediately changed the topic. She restrained the anger and resentment on her face and lowered her head to complain tearfully, as if she had been wronged. Chu Liyue sneered inwardly. She wanted to throw dirty water on her? That would depend on whether or not she was willing to accept it. Third princess, you've misunderstood me. When your face was scratched, I hadn't formed a contract with it yet. I really didn't do it on purpose. As for the trouble Dumpling caused previously, although it had nothing to do with me, I still felt very apologetic. After I came back, I went straight to the palace to offer the blood of the mythological beast to His Majesty and you. If I really wanted to make things difficult for you, why would I do this? Chu Liuyue's tone was light and his expression was sincere. Sheng Wanwan was so angry that her chest rose and fell violently. Her eyes widened and her chest rose and fell violently, but she couldn't say a single word. She had clearly taken the initiative to ask for the blood of the mythological beast, so how did it become her offering the treasure in Chu Liuyue's mouth? Lies really came easily from his mouth. However, even though Sheng Wanwan was extremely angry, she couldn't refute it. Could it be that she had to admit in public that she had forced Chu Liuyue to take out the blood of the mythological beast? Seeing Sheng Wanwan's guilty appearance, many people secretly despised her. Since it was a mistake made before the contract was formed, then this matter naturally had nothing to do with Chu Liuyue. It was already very rare for her to be willing to take the initiative to help, but Sheng Wanwan actually made a false accusation. It was obvious what kind of person she was. At this time, Jiang Yuqing finally spoke. Even so, it's a fact that you hurt the third princess. You should take responsibility for it. In front of everyone, he naturally had to stand on Sheng Wanwan's side. Moreover, he wasn't sure of Chu Liuyue's identity and didn't know what she was planning to do. Naturally, he was extremely vigilant. Chu Liuyue glanced at the Tianling scepter. She really knew how to cause more trouble than she did. The Tianling scepter trembled imperceptibly. After this matter, I will naturally do what I have to do. But now, the winner of this bet can be decided, right? As Chu Liuyue spoke, she raised her arm and flipped her wrist. Swoosh! She held the Tianling scepter tightly in her hand and pointed the dragon's head directly at Jiang Yucheng. Jiang Yucheng's heart trembled. He didn't know why, but when he met those golden dragon eyes, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. It was as if everything about him had been seen through. He instinctively looked away and frowned. I have already picked up the Tianling scepter and obtained its approval. Then, Chu Liuyue's eyes narrowed dangerously. Her red lips parted slightly, but her eyes were cold. Can we start investigating the crown princess's death again? There was silence in front of the huge Langkuan palace. Chu Liuyue held the Tianling scepter in her hand, and her dragon eyes shone brightly. Everyone understood that Chu Liuyue had indeed won this bet. When they heard her mention investigating the crown princess's death again, many people had complicated expressions. Who would have thought that this grand and solemn ceremony would end up like this? Almost everyone looked at Sheng Wanwan and Jiang Yucheng. In front of everyone, they couldn't break the contract on the spot. This time, they had to investigate. Jiang Yucheng stared intently at Chu Liuyue. After a long while, he said, "All right. Since you have done it, then the third princess and I will naturally accept our loss." The crowd instantly became chaotic. This meant that he agreed. They really had to investigate the crown princess's death again. 2 years ago, everything happened too quickly, and there were indeed many suspicious points. But now, they were finally going to investigate thoroughly. Do you think that there really was something fishy about the crown princess's death back then? The Tianling scepter felt that the crown princess had been wronged, so it allowed Chu Liuyue to succeed in exchange for this opportunity. It can't be. Wasn't it already decided at that time? Even the crown princess's trusted aides didn't make much of a fuss. If there really was a problem, would they let it go? Why not? The crown princess's trusted aides are now either dead or injured, especially the 13 Yu guards. They are still being hunted down, and there are very few of them left. If you really want to say something, it can only be Mu Qinghe. I think so too. If not, there's really no way to explain how Chu Liuyue picked up the Tianling scepter. She's so persistent. Could it be that she was also one of the crown princess's people back then? Everyone discussed in low voices, and all kinds of guesses appeared. Jiang Yucheng heard most of it, and his heart was in a mess. He looked at Chu Liuyue and said in a low voice, "Put the Tianling scepter back into the black mystic stone first, and everything else can be discussed." After all, it was the sacred artifact of the Tianling dynasty. How could it be in Chu Liuyue's hands like this? Especially when there was a battered and exhausted Sheng Wanwan beside him. The comparison was tragic. It was like a joke. Chu Liuyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Okay. Then, she flicked her wrist. The Tianling scepter quickly flew out. However, not long after it flew out, the Tianling scepter suddenly changed direction and flew back, standing in front of Chu Liuyue again. The dragon head lightly tapped on the back of Chu Liuyue's hand, then shook and jumped, as if it was asking for credit. Hee hee. I'm back. Did you miss me? The corner of Chu Liuyue's mouth twitched. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 877. How should she put it? In her previous life, she did not have the chance to wait until the day of her wedding. Naturally, she did not get to see the Tianling scepter. In Chu Liuyue's heart, the Tianling scepter had always been a very dignified and sacred existence. It was high up and could not be blasphemed. So today, when the Tianling scepter flew towards her, she was both surprised and happy. With the Tianling scepter in her hand, it seemed to make up for all the regrets she had in the past. But no one had ever told her that the Tianling scepter was so clingy. Looking at the Tianling scepter in front of her, which was so happy that it was waiting to be praised, even someone as strong as Chu Luyue felt that she could not take it for a moment. If you are happy, why don't you consider me? There are so many people watching. Under normal circumstances, Chu Luyue did not really care about other people's gazes. Only at this moment did he feel as though he was burning. Cough. Chu Luyue clenched her fist and coughed. Then, she stretched out her hand and pushed it. Well, I think you should go back. The Tianling scepter did not seem to hear her and continued to swing its head around. It did not seem to have any intention of going back. Swoosh. Something flashed in front of Chu Luyue's eyes. Tuanzi suddenly flew out and faced the Tianling scepter as it widened its round eyes. I told you to go back. Why are you still here? The Tianling scepter paused and swayed in another position, circling around Chu Luyue's hand. Why do you care? It is not a divine beast. Why are you jealous of it? Dumpling was confused. Chu Luyue was speechless. One was a divine beast, and the other was a sacred object. Either one of them would be envied. But why did she feel an inexplicable sense of embarrassment? Seeing that they were going to continue arguing, Chu Luyue made a prompt decision. She grabbed Dumpling's wings and put it on her shoulder. However, as soon as he let go, Dumpling struggled and rushed out again. The Tianling scepter also jumped back and forth as if it was provoking him. Chu Luyue held his forehead helplessly. Finally, he couldn't help but shout, "Don't make a fuss." It was finally quiet. The Tianling scepter obediently stood to the side, and Dumpling once again nestled on Chu Luyue's shoulder. Chu Luyue heaved a long sigh of relief and looked at Jiang Yucheng. Well, I've already tried my best. I really can't do anything about this kind of thing. Jiang Yucheng's expression was very strange. It couldn't be helped. No one would be able to remain calm after witnessing such a scene. However, Jiang Yucheng was someone who had seen a lot. He quickly calmed down. Seeing that the Tianling scepter was really sticking to Chu Luyue and refusing to leave, Shang Guanwan would only lose more face if they continued to dwell on this issue. The best way was to ignore it for now. Therefore, Jiang Yucheng directly changed the topic. Let's not talk about this matter for now. As for what you said just now, we will send a small team to investigate again, no need. Chu Luyue chuckled and interrupted Jiang Yucheng. That would be too troublesome. Let's just start here. What? Jiang Yucheng was also stunned for a moment. For a moment, he didn't know what Chu Luyue meant. Even Shang Guanwan could not help but open her mouth again and scold him coldly. Start here? How can that be? Chu Luyue, get it straight. This is Lankuan Palace. How can you be so presumptuous here? Not only did you rely on the Tianling scepter to steal the limelight, you actually want to start investigating Shang Guanyu's death here? You're thinking too much. Jiang Yucheng also frowned. After all, today is the day of my wedding with the third princess. Even if Jiang Yucheng didn't care much about Shang Guanwan, he still attached great importance to this wedding. Shang Guanwan's side had already caused enough trouble. If Shang Guanyu's death was also brought up, it would really be a mess. Upon hearing Jiang Yucheng's words, Shang Guanwan's face also carried a hint of resentment. Chu Luyue, you insist on doing this. Could it be that you don't want to see this consort happy? On this consort's wedding day, you deliberately brought up this consort. Are you sincerely cursing this consort? Chu Luyue widened his eyes in confusion. Third princess, where did this come from? Didn't you always say that the crown princess is the elder sister that you respect the most? Why do you feel that mentioning her today is a curse to you? Shang Guanwan immediately choked and was speechless. Chu Luyue chuckled. Her Highness the Crown Princess has always doted on you. If she knew that you were getting married to the Prince Consort today, I'm sure that she would be happy for you. Don't you think so? Shang Wanwan suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. It went straight to the top of her head. Enough. She rudely interrupted Chu Liuyue's words. Just do whatever you want to do. At that time, Shang Guanyu was already dead, and all the evidence and clues were basically destroyed. There was no way to investigate at all. She didn't believe that these people would be able to find anything 2 years later. Jiang Yuqing subconsciously wanted to stop her, but Shang Guanwan had already spoken. He slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves. For some reason, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. Many thanks for third princess's understanding. Chu Luiyue smiled in response, then took a step forward. Everyone looked over with different expressions on their faces. Chu Luiyue looked straight at Jiang Yuqing. The smile on her face gradually faded, and there seemed to be a cold glint in her eyes. Back then, the crown princess's funeral was jointly managed by the third princess and the prince consort. Then, the two of you are the ones who know the most about everything, right? Jiang Yuqing didn't know what she was going to do, but he still nodded. That's right. At that time, he was still a low-level fiancé, and Shang Guanwan was the only one who was slightly older among the heirs of the imperial family. Naturally, the two of them were in charge. Everyone was aware of this. That's good. I have a few questions that I want to ask the two of you first. Chu Luiyue raised a finger. First, when something happened to the crown princess, it was you who discovered it first, right? Yes. Jiang Yuqing answered without hesitation. These questions had already been asked by countless people. He, Shang Guanwan, and the others had already made up a set of excuses. Even if Chu Luiyue asked him 100 times in public, he would still say the same thing. That day, the crown princess said that she wanted to cultivate and try to break through to the 9th stage, so she chose to go into seclusion. But not long after, I noticed that something was wrong. When I barged in, I found that the crown princess was already dying. Jiang Yuqing spoke very smoothly and calmly, as if the scene that day was really like that. Chu Luiyue raised a second finger. All right. Second question, why didn't the crown princess cultivate earlier or later? Why did she have to try to break through to the 9th stage on such an important day before the wedding? All cultivators know that breaking through is risky, and the higher the level, the longer it takes to break through. Could it be that she doesn't want to participate in the wedding the next day? Chapter 878. Jiang Yuqing was still able to respond easily. No one knew what the Empress concubine was thinking. But everyone knew that apart from the wedding, the next day was also her ascension ceremony. Perhaps she did this to pick up the Tianling scepter and stand on it in a better posture. Moreover, she had a Tianjing Yuan meridian. Breaking through to rank 9 might be unattainable for ordinary cultivators. But for her, it might be much easier. These words were not without reason. Not long after the Empress concubine was born, she was tested to have a Tianjing Yuan meridian. Since then, she had been the top genius of the entire Tianling dynasty. Whether it was martial cultivation, Xian master, or celestial physician, she was extremely talented. It wasn't strange for her to have such thoughts. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully and then asked, "Why are you here?" In that case, why didn't the Empress concubine go to the ancestral hall if she planned to focus on breaking through? I remember that the ancestral hall of the Tianling royal family was also destroyed because of this, right? As the heir to the Tianling throne, what's wrong with going to the ancestral hall? Jiang Yuqing asked. Of course there's nothing wrong with it. According to this, the Empress concubine was in the ancestral hall the entire day before yesterday? And eldest young Master Jiang, you were guarding outside the entire time? Of course. The people who served her that day can testify to this. Jiang Yuqing had already answered these questions countless times, so he was completely at ease. His brows gradually furrowed as he looked at Chu Luiyue and said coldly, if the reinvestigation you're talking about is asking these questions again in front of everyone, then let me tell you, this is meaningless. If you really have doubts about what happened back then, you have to produce evidence. Otherwise, there's no need to continue. I haven't finished asking yet. Chu Luiyue smiled and suddenly looked at Yuqi Song. Master, you should also have some questions to ask eldest young Master Jiang, right? Hearing this, everyone turned to look at Weiqi Song. Weiqi Song nodded, looked at Jiang Yucheng, and said in a deep voice, previously, this old man had made a trip to Thousand View Garden's zither room to retrieve some of the items I had left there. However, there was something wrong with Empress Concubine's phoenix tail zither. Hearing the words, phoenix tail zither, Jiang Yucheng's heart suddenly sank. Everyone knows that the Empress Concubine loved that zither very much when she was alive. However, this old man discovered that the Empress Concubine had left a Xian formation on it. Weiqi Song stared intently at Jiang Yucheng and enunciated every word clearly. Although this old man isn't a top-notch mystic cultivator, I have dabbled in this aspect. The Xian formation that the Empress Concubine had engraved on the zither was only a level 3 Xian formation. But the important thing was that the name of the Xian formation was Dragon Trapping Formation. If there really isn't any problem, then why did Princess leave such a profound formation on the zither that she likes so much? In this old man's opinion, the level and power of that Xian formation are not worth mentioning, but the name of that Xian formation is very meaningful. Dragon Trapping Formation. When a dragon is trapped, it seeks help from the outside. The Empress Concubine had clearly encountered danger, so she left this Xian formation, hinting that she had been harmed by a traitor. Once this was said, everyone was shocked. If what Yuqi Song said was true, then there really was a big problem with this matter. One had to know that the Empress Concubine had outstanding talent in this aspect since she was young. It was absolutely impossible for her to leave a mere level 3 Xian formation on such a precious item. Yuqi Song's explanation was the only reasonable answer. Jiang Yucheng was greatly alarmed and clenched his fists tightly. He had been careless. He had been in charge of the zither room for 2 years, but he had never discovered that there was such a hint on the zither. At that time, it was in the zither room. After Sheng Guanyu finished playing a song, he brought the last cup of tea to Sheng Guanyu, luring her poison to act up. After that, she quickly realized that something was wrong and wanted to resist. But at that time, she was already no match for Jiang Yucheng. In the end, he secretly brought her back to the palace and locked her in the imperial family's ancestral hall. At that time, he had always thought that everything had progressed smoothly. But now that he thought about it, she had indeed struggled and stayed by the zither for quite a long time. Could it be that the Xian formation was left behind at that time? Jiang Yucheng tried his best to calm himself down and said with a cold expression, Pavilion Master Yuqi, you have to pay attention to evidence when you speak. The evidence is on the phoenix tail zither. Yuqi Song immediately said. You have always been in charge of the zither room. As long as you send someone to retrieve the phoenix tail zither, we will know at a glance. When everyone heard this, they felt that it was very reasonable and all looked at Jiang Yucheng. Jiang Yucheng pursed his lips. At this moment, he finally understood that the secret Yuqi Song had discovered in the zither room that day was actually this. No wonder his attitude changed so much after that. It turned out that he was already certain that someone had harmed Sheng Guanyu. As one of the closest people to Sheng Guanyu and the one who accompanied Shanghai Yu to the zither room the most, his suspicions were naturally the greatest. The phoenix tail zither was lost some time ago. Jiang Yucheng took a deep breath and said. At this moment, he was incomparably glad that the zither was gone. Otherwise, if the evidence was verified and it was as Weiqi Song had said, there was no way he could clear his name. Everyone was in an uproar. Lost? How could such an important thing be lost? Hasn't Jiang Yucheng always been in charge of the zither room? How could it be lost for no reason? Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Low voices of doubt could be heard from the crowd. Jiang Yucheng was also somewhat embarrassed. But at this moment, this was undoubtedly the best excuse. It was my incompetence that led to the loss of the phoenix tail zither. I've been sending people to secretly search for it, but there hasn't been any progress. I'm afraid that this lead will be cut off for the time being. Jiang Yuqing looked a little ashamed, but his eyes were very resolute. Without the zither, there's no way to prove whether what Pavilion Master Yuqi said was true or false. Pavilion Master Yuqi, it's not that I don't trust you, but this is a serious matter. Without concrete evidence, I don't dare to say anything. Yuqi Song asked in return. In other words, you'll only admit to my words if we find the phoenix tail zither? Jiang Yuqing paused. Yes. Without the phoenix tail zither, everything that happened today would not have been able to continue. Everything would have been empty talk. Many people looked disappointed. They thought that they had finally found some clues, but they didn't expect it to be gone just like that. If the crown princess was really harmed, then the longer this dragged on, the harder it would be to find out the truth. At this moment, Yuqi Song suddenly said, "What a coincidence. What a coincidence. Yesterday, someone delivered a gift to this old man." Jiang Yuqing suddenly looked up. Then, he saw Yuqi Song wave his sleeve, and a zither appeared in front of him. It was the phoenix tail zither. It's just right here. Why don't we take a look at it ourselves? Digression, the 5th chapter is about to be updated. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 879. The expression on Jiang Yuqing's face finally cracked, and he cried out in shock, "Why is this thing with you? Could it be that the person who secretly broke into the zither room and stole this phoenix tail zither was Yuqi Song? That person's aura was hidden extremely well. He had never thought that it would be related to Yuqi Song. Didn't this old man say just now? This is a big gift sent by someone yesterday." Yuqi Song stroked his beard and showed the phoenix tail zither to everyone. Everyone can take a look and see if this is the zither that the Empress concubine had back then. Everyone looked at each other and fell silent for a moment. Eldest young Master Jiang should be the most familiar with this thing. Why don't you check it out? Otherwise, someone will say that this old man took a fake thing and created a rumor out of thin air here. As Yuqi Song spoke, he even pushed it forward. Jiang Yuqing was standing 10 steps away. With his eyesight, from the moment he saw this thing, he had already confirmed that this was indeed the one that was lost in the zither room. However, he really couldn't figure out why this thing would be with Yuqi Song. He said that someone sent it yesterday. Who was that person? Let me take a look. In the quiet and strange atmosphere, a person walked out. It was Yuan Wei. He walked over with a smile. Back then, Her Highness the Empress concubine liked this zither very much and specially asked me to prepare many matching items. Therefore, I am quite familiar with this thing. I will identify it. Everyone should trust me, right? Yuqi Song handed the item over. Please, although Yuan Wei's position wasn't comparable to the 3 dukes, his status was also very noble because his family had been passed down for thousands of years. His words carried a lot of weight. Yuan Wei carefully took the phoenix tail zither and looked around carefully. His expression gradually became serious. After a moment, he nodded. This is indeed the Empress concubine's item. Moreover, there is indeed a dragon trapping array inside this zither. Let me take a look too. Jian Shai finally couldn't help but come over and take a look. There seemed to be a glimmer of light flickering on the phoenix-tailed zither. Flipping it over, one could see that there was indeed a palm-sized Xian formation at the bottom, and it was shining brightly. Jiang Yuqing's mind was in chaos. Back then, he had only been focused on dealing with the Shengguan Yu and hadn't paid much attention to the phoenix tail zither. In the past 2 years, he had rubbed the rosin on the phoenix tail zither countless times, but he had never noticed this. Thinking of this, he immediately said, "This Xian formation didn't exist before. I've never seen a Xian formation like this before." It was only a level 3 Xian formation, and any Xian master could carve it on it. Pavilion Master Yuchi, even if you suspect that there's a problem with the princess's death, there's no need to use such methods to deceive everyone, right? Wei Qi-song laughed coldly when he heard this. Of course you didn't see it before because there was a seal on the Xian formation. It was only after this old man broke the seal that this profound formation was revealed. Jiang Yuqing froze on the spot. What seal? He actually knew nothing about this. This is indeed the dragon trapping array. And this aura is indeed from the princess's hands. Jian Shai nodded affirmatively. Because the material of this phoenix tail zither is extremely precious and special, ordinary people can't leave any traces on it. Although this Xian formation is only a level 3 Xian formation, the person who can do this is definitely a top-notch Xian master. If I'm not wrong, the princess should have used the power of her Tianjing Yuan meridian to seal this Xian formation and conceal its aura. Yu Qi-song stroked his beard. That's right. This old man only saw this dragon trapping array after breaking the seal. Shang Guanyu's strength had already reached level 8 Xian master back then. If she wanted to hide something, it definitely wouldn't be a difficult matter. Jiang Yuqing's heart kept sinking, and his entire body turned ice cold. He had overlooked it. He had truly overlooked it. He had actually forgotten that he wasn't Shang Guanyu's opponent at all, which was why he couldn't even see through her methods. And now, all of this had become conclusive evidence. After that, a few more people came forward to take a look. They all nodded and confirmed that this was indeed left behind by the princess back then. Because she had a Tianjing Yuan meridian, her aura was very easy to recognize. Anyone with some status in the Tianling dynasty would be able to confirm it with just one look. What's this? As Jian Shai spoke, he suddenly saw that there seemed to be something under the Xian formation. He moved closer, and his expression changed slightly. There's a word of blood on it. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. If nothing really happened, why would there be a word of blood on the phoenix tail zither? Moreover, she used such complicated methods to conceal it. Jiang Yuqing's heart thumped violently. It almost jumped out of his chest. All the blood in his body seemed to freeze at this moment. No, everything happened very quickly back then. Shang Guanyu couldn't possibly have the time and energy to do all this. Jiang Yuqing kept admonishing himself, but there was still a voice in the depths of his heart that kept ringing. Why not? She was smart and quick-witted. Was there anything she couldn't do? This word of blood was also left behind by the princess. Jian Shai's expression had completely turned cold. Yuan Wei and the others who were standing nearby also had a change in expression. Naturally, they recognized him as well. What's the word of blood on it? Someone couldn't wait to ask. Yu Qi-song laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes. Jiang Yuqing, you should know what the word of blood on it says, right? Jiang Yuqing's temples throbbed. I don't, Jiang. Jian Shai suddenly raised the phoenix tail zither and shouted sternly. The word of Jiang is on it. Jiang Yuqing, isn't this your Jiang? Digression, Tianling scepter, I heard that someone said that I'm a clown. February, yes. They're all talking about you. Tianling scepter, angry. February, yes. So I won't add more chapters for them. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 880. His voice was like thunder as it fell heavily. In an instant, everyone was shocked on the spot. The bloody words hidden on the phoenix tail guqin were actually Jiang. Anyone with a brain could guess that the Empress concubine had used such a complicated method to leave this secret signal on the phoenix tail guqin. There was definitely a hidden meaning. Dragon trapping array bloody words Jiang, isn't this implying that Jiang Yuqing is the one who harmed me? There was dead silence in front of Lang Kuan Hall. Jiang Yuqing's ears were ringing. Jian Shai's stern questioning was like a heavy punch, catching him off guard and completely stupefied on the spot. He thought that everything back then was flawless and that no one would be able to find any clues. But he never expected that Shang Guanyu had actually left a trick up her sleeve. There was actually such a shocking secret hidden on the phoenix tail Guqin. Everyone's gazes converged on him. Suspicion, shock, anger, all kinds of gazes enveloped Jiang Yuqing like flames. Even his entire body felt like it was burning up. A sense of crisis that he had never felt before welled up in his heart. Jiang Yuqing had never been as embarrassed as he was now. He tried his best to calm himself down and tried to make his voice sound calm. The word Jiang doesn't mean anything. Not to mention the Tianling dynasty, there are countless people with the surname Jiang in Xiling City alone. Why are you so sure that it's me at first glance? What if this word doesn't refer to my surname, but something else? Jian Shai was so angry that he laughed. Jiang Yuqing, don't play dumb here. There are many people with the surname Jiang, but I'm afraid there aren't many who can be remembered by the Empress concubine, right? If she wasn't forced into a desperate situation, the Empress concubine definitely wouldn't have left such a hint. In other words, it's very likely that something happened to her in the zither room. And you, aren't you the one who usually accompanies her in the zither room? Do you really not know anything about this? Jiang Yuqing's eyes flickered. Mountain Lord Jian's words aren't without reason. But this matter indeed has nothing to do with me. Back then, the Empress concubine and I were in love, and we were about to get married. What reason do I have to harm her? You'll have to ask yourself. Wei Qi Song suddenly interjected, his voice flat and indifferent. Didn't you also get together with the third princess in less than 2 years after the Empress concubine left? You even got married? Well said. As soon as Yuqi Song finished speaking, another powerful voice came from the other side. It was none other than Meng Jingji, who had been extremely dissatisfied with this marriage from the very beginning. Even if I don't ask you to be the Empress concubine and never marry again, you should at least show some sincerity, right? In the end, right after you finished the princess funeral, you were together with the third princess. You still have the face to say that you were in love? Heh, if this was the Western frontier, someone like you wouldn't be considered a man. Even women wouldn't take a fancy to you. Jiang Yuqing and Shang Guanwan were together. Their relationship was fake, but their identity was real. If Shang Guanwan didn't have such a status, why would Jiang Yuqing even spare her a glance? Although Meng Jingji was stationed at the western frontier all year round and didn't return to the western tomb often, this didn't mean that he knew nothing about the western tomb. He was a military general, but he also had good eyesight. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to sit in this position for dozens of years. Back then, even Mu Qinghe couldn't replace him when she led troops to quell the rebellion in the Great Desolate Swamp. This person's ability could be seen at a glance. Jiang Yuqing's face instantly darkened. Shang Guanwan was still shocked and worried about the phoenix tail zither, but in the next moment, she heard that she was also being scolded. She was so angry that her face turned white. But when she glanced at Meng Jingji, she forcefully swallowed back those unpleasant words. This person was a tough nut to crack. Today's troubles were already enough. If she provoked Meng Jingji, it would be like adding oil to the fire. Jiang Yuqing remained unmoved. He only said indifferently, "My marriage with Wan has nothing to do with this. Even if there's really something fishy about the princess's death, everyone shouldn't be able to pin the crime on me just based on the word blood, right?" He planned to insist on this point. It's true that the word Jiang was written on it, and it's also true that he was one of the closest people to the princess back then. Anyone who saw this would inevitably make the connection. But as long as they couldn't produce any other evidence, he still had some leeway. That's right. You have no evidence. My Jiang family won't let you off just because you're slandering Yuqing. We'll be at your mercy. Jiang Lizhua stood out and hollered in a low voice. This old man wants to see who it is that wants to drag my Jiang family down with him. How dare you pour this basin of dirty water on my son? Jiang Lizhua was a grand tutor after all, and his status was very high. In addition, Jiang Yuqing was now married to the third princess, so the entire Jiang family's status had risen by another level. Ordinary people really couldn't afford to offend the Jiang family. However, Yuqi Song suddenly laughed. Everyone will eventually find out who this basin of dirty water belongs to. Since you want evidence, I'll give it to you. Jiang Yuqing's brows twitched harshly. Seeing Yuqi Song's confident look, does he really have any evidence? Yuqi Song stared at him and slowly said, I watched the princess grow up with me. I'm indebted to the princess's love for me, and she treats me as half a master. Ever since the princess's death, my Chongshu pavilion has also suffered continuous attacks. The pavilion's elders and disciples have all been beaten up, and there aren't many people left. It's almost impossible for the mountain gate to hold on. The reason for all of this is actually just that I want to investigate the princess's death. Yuqi Song's expression gradually turned solemn and cold, and even the surrounding space seemed to freeze along with it. It's not just my Chongshu pavilion. In the past 2 years, there have been many people who want to investigate the truth behind the princess's death. However, these people have either died or been injured, and some have even quietly disappeared, never to appear again. It's as if someone is deliberately obstructing them by hook or by crook. Everyone should be aware of this. In this world, the one who doesn't want the truth of that matter to be exposed the most is most likely the person who harmed the princess. A few people inwardly nodded. Although no one had said this on the surface, everyone knew in their hearts. Jiang Lizuo was so angry that he laughed. What, Yuqi Song, do you mean that the one who secretly killed your Chongshu pavilion is my son? Jiang Yuqing also frowned. Pavilion Master Yuqi, I've already personally sent Qi Dai to you. It's true that he used Chaos Yuan gravel on the Chongshu pavilion, but I truly didn't know about this matter before. Whether it's true or not, let him come over and we'll know when we confront him. Yuqi Song said indifferently. Jiang Yuqing felt that this was extremely absurd and couldn't help but say, you know that Qi Dai is already delirious, so how can you confront him? Oh, you're talking about this. Yuqi Song suddenly laughed. This old man has already cured him. A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 881. Qi Dai, you say it yourself. Yuqi Song ignored the shock on Jiang Yuqing and the others' faces and suddenly turned around to wave at someone. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. He had been standing behind Yuqi Song and the others, so everyone subconsciously thought that he was a disciple of the Chongshu pavilion and didn't pay him any attention. After hearing Yuqi Song's words, he walked forward and rubbed his lower jaw for a while before taking off a thin mask. Under the mask, the person's cheeks were thin and his face was haggard, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His left ear was gone, and there was only a scar the size of a bowl. It was a ghastly sight. It was Qi Dai. Jiang Yuqing looked at Qi Dai, who should have died in the Chongshu pavilion, and his hands were already tightly clenched in his sleeves. He didn't die. He actually didn't die. Most importantly, the pair of muddy eyes had actually regained their clarity at this moment. Apart from looking a little weak, he was no different from an ordinary person. Qi Dai raised his head to look at Jiang Yuqing, and his emotions suddenly became intense. His eyes were filled with anger and resentment. His entire body trembled, and he wanted nothing more than to immediately charge forward and chop Jiang Yuqing into 8 pieces. However, his chest was surging with anger, and he couldn't say a single word. He could only let out a hoarse whimper that was difficult to understand. His throat has been drugged, and he can't speak anymore. Yuqi Song looked indifferently at Jiang Yuqing. I wonder what the person who drugged him was worried that he would say. Yuan Wei glanced at the situation, and his eyes moved slightly. Pavilion Master Yuqi, this Qi Dai it's a long story. Then, Yuqi Song gave a simple account of finding the Mest Yuan gravel and finding the person who had secretly tried to kill them. Mest Yuan gravel can only be found in Nanjiang, and not many people in the entire Tianling dynasty have been to Nanjiang. Coincidentally, eldest young Master Jiang brought people there not long after the Empress concubine's death. This old man then asked him to help investigate. After a long time, he sent Chi Dai over, saying that he was the one who did it. At that time, Chi Dai had been tortured and beaten. He was unconscious and could not answer any questions. Even if this old man wanted to ask more, it would be impossible. Jiang Yuqing said coldly. Pavilion Master Wei Qi, are you doubting me? Chi Dai's body has traces of the mixed yuan gravel's backlash. You clearly saw it that day. Why are you not going to admit it now? Wei Qi Song, however, merely smiled. Chi Dai, raise your arm for everyone to see. Chi Dai did as he was told and rolled up his sleeves, revealing his forearms. On the inside of his forearm, there was a red line that extended from his palm upwards. Is this the evidence of the mixed yuan gravel's backlash? Jian Shai was shocked when he saw it. He immediately moved closer to take a closer look. There were very few people in the entire Tianling dynasty who could recognize this. Otherwise, Yuqi Song and the others would not have taken so long to figure out this matter. That's right. This is indeed the evidence of the mixed yuan gravel in his body, but the backlash. Jiang Yuqing heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Since Pavilion Master Wei Qi also said so, then where did this suspicion come from? Yuqi Song pointed at Chi Dai. Naturally, it's because the mixed yuan gravel in Chi Dai's body backfired much later than when we discovered the mixed yuan gravel. To be honest, the matter of the mixed yuan gravel was discovered on the day Lu Yu and Wanzhou officially entered my Chongshu pavilion. Wanzhou grew up in Nanjiang, so it was him who recognized this thing. In the following 2 days, we thought of a way to clean up all the mixed yuan gravel on Qingyuan Mountain. Logically speaking, the person who did this should have suffered the backlash at that time. However, all the injuries on Chi Dai's body were added within this month. With every sentence Yuqi Song said, Jiang Yuqing's heart sank an inch. Apart from me, there are also many celestial physicians with superb strength present. If you don't believe me, you can come forward and check for yourself. Chi Dai's injuries clearly appeared after I went to ask Jiang Yuqing for help. As soon as Yuqi Song finished speaking, everyone quieted down and looked at Jiang Yuqing strangely. At this point, even a fool could tell that there was a problem. If Jiang Yuqing didn't do this because he had a guilty conscience, then why? Chi Dai, who caused the injuries on your body? Yuqi Song asked. Chi Dai pointed at Jiang Yuqing angrily and let out a hoarse cry of despair. Just take it that he did it for interrogation, so let's not talk about it for now. Then, who planted the mixed yuan gravel in your body? Chi Dai still pointed at Jiang Yuqing, his finger trembling slightly because of resentment and anger. Jiang Yuqing stared at him. Chi Dai, you and I are master and servant. I've never done anything to let you down. Why are you slandering me like this? Whether it's slander or not, everyone can see it clearly. I heard that you gathered all the subordinates who had gone to Nanjiang together and interrogated them one by one. After that, most of them went back. Only Chi Dai went missing. The next time he appeared, it was you who sent him to my Chongshu pavilion. Wasn't it easy to do something during such a long time? Thinking about it, he should have been poisoned by the mixed yuan gravel at that time. Yuqi Song said slowly, but every word was like a heavy stone that smashed fiercely into Jiang Yuqing's heart. Do you have any explanation for all this? Everyone looked at Jiang Yuqing, waiting for his answer. In fact, even if he didn't say anything, everyone already had their own guesses in their hearts. What Yuqi Song said couldn't be faked. It was almost certainly true. Then, there was indeed something wrong with Jiang Yuqing. Faced with everyone's burning gazes, Jiang Yuqing took a deep breath and said coldly, Chi Dai followed me through life and death. Why should I treat him like this? At that time, Pavilion Master Yuqi took the initiative to ask me for help. That's why I did this. In the end, you're saying that I lied to you? What good would that do for me? Fabricating a fake was naturally to cover up the real one. Yuqi Song's lips twitched without a smile. His gaze was sharp and cold, like a sharp sword that wanted to tear off Jiang Yuqing's hypocritical mask. If eldest young Master Jiang doesn't mind, can you show your arm for everyone to see? There's a question that this old man has been wanting to ask you for a long time. Your arm was injured not earlier or later, but on the day we cleaned up the mess you on gravel and caused the person who secretly poisoned you to suffer a backlash? Jiang Yucheng, can you answer these questions one by one? Asked Jiang Yucheng. A better reading experience came from Love Network. Chapter 882. Yuqi Song pressed on, his series of questions almost suffocating Jiang Yucheng. He originally thought that Qi Dai would die soon after arriving at Chongshu Pavilion. Even if he didn't die, the people at Chongshu Pavilion would kill him out of hatred. Even if Yuqi Song and the others had doubts, they wouldn't be able to stir up any more waves. This matter would be closed. But he never expected that not only did Yuqi Song and the others fail to kill Qi Dai, they even tried their best to save him. No matter how he thought about it, he actually left himself a huge problem. Jiang Yucheng was filled with regret. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have made such an unnecessary move. Even if Yuqi Song and the others kept suspecting him, they wouldn't be able to find any evidence. It would be a waste of effort. If he had thought more at that time, he wouldn't have fallen into such a trap. Now, the timing of Qi Dai's backlash from the chaos yuan gravel didn't match up. Instead, it became the best evidence for them to refute him. Jiang Yucheng understood that if he couldn't give a reasonable explanation for this matter, then from now on, he would have to bear this stigma. Pavilion Master Wei Qi, I really don't know what's going on. Qi Dai used to be my subordinate, but after returning from Nanjiang, I dismissed them all. If it weren't for helping you this time, I wouldn't have gone to look for them at all. For such a long time, no one knows what they've been doing, or who they've been following. Maybe they've already changed masters and are targeting me. Jiang Yucheng gritted his teeth and only said that he had nothing to do with this matter. There's one thing that many people might still remember. Previously, I was ambushed in my residence and was injured. Because of this, I sent people to track down that person's whereabouts. And the person I was looking for at that time was actually Qi Dai's good friend. To be honest, that person's name is Xiao Mu. He and Qi Dai are good brothers who have gone through fire and water together. After being dismissed, the two of them didn't have any other relatives, so they became neighbors. They took care of each other and had a very good relationship. Since Xiao Mu was able to assassinate me, who knows if Qi Dai did not have the same goal. Although Jiang Yucheng's explanation was somewhat weak, it was not completely unconvincing. After all, the news of him being assassinated in the Jiang mansion had spread like wildfire among the aristocratic families. To say that he was putting on a show was a bit too much. During this period of time, Qi Dai has indeed been detained by me. However, in the beginning, I only detained him because I wanted to investigate Xiao Mu. Who would have thought that he would later discover that he had actually suffered a backlash from the chaos yuan gravel? I thought that he was the person Pavilion Master Wei Qi was looking for. After interrogating him, I sent him away. As for the rest, I really don't know. Jiang Yucheng cupped his hands at Yuqi Song. Speaking of which, I was negligent in this matter. I hope Pavilion Master Wei Qi won't blame me. But these things really have nothing to do with me. Back then, experts were as numerous as clouds in the Chongshu Pavilion. How could I have the ability to kill most of the cultivators in the Chongshu Pavilion in a single night? Pavilion Master Wei Qi, you think too highly of me. Hearing Jiang Yucheng's words, everyone's expressions were different. Many people's eyes were wavering. Chu Luyue couldn't help but sneer as she listened from the side. Jiang Yucheng's mouth was as eloquent as always. He could make black sound white and wrong sound right. Just now, Yuqi Song had clearly laid out the evidence. It was almost irrefutable. He was actually able to rely on his glib tongue to earn a place for himself. She had really underestimated him. Eldest young Master Jiang. Chu Luyue suddenly spoke. According to what you said, the Zhejiang character on the phoenix-tailed zither has nothing to do with you. This chaos yuan gravel also has nothing to do with you, right? Jiang Yucheng's expression was indifferent, as if he was very frank. Yes. Back then, I was about to marry the Empress concubine. Why would I do these things and painstakingly scheme to harm her? Everyone looked at each other. Actually, this was also the most strange thing about them. Jiang Yuqing's status back then was definitely higher than the Empress concubine's. This marriage only had benefits for him, no harm at all. But any normal person wouldn't personally ruin their own future and happiness, right? One had to know that back then, many young talents wanted this opportunity, but they didn't succeed. Because of his engagement with the Empress concubine, Jiang Yuqing had been envied by many of Xiling City's aristocratic families for a very long time. Back then, he really seemed to have been very attentive to the Empress concubine. There was really no reason for him to do this. No matter what he wanted, as long as he married the Empress concubine smoothly, wouldn't it be logical? Why did he have to go through so much trouble, killing the Empress concubine and eliminating the weeds by the roots? And in the end, it was just a big wedding with the third princess Shangguanwan. Compared to the Empress concubine, it was even worse. Chu Luyue nodded thoughtfully, as if she was also moved by his words. That's true. I heard that the Empress concubine treated you well back then, and you also won the Empress concubine's favor with great difficulty. Originally, everything was fine, so you really had no reason to betray her, right? She spoke slowly, as if she was stating a fact, but also as if she was faintly puzzled. For some reason, when Jiang Yuqing looked at Chu Luyue like this, an inexplicable sense of apprehension and panic arose in his heart. Her words seemed to be hinting at something. Chu Luyue suddenly smiled. On her beautiful face, there was undisguised curiosity and mockery. When Jiang Yuqing saw her smile, he was actually in a trance. Her clear, black jade-like eyes seemed to have a dark light flowing, like a sharp sword, piercing straight at him. Since eldest young Master Jiang has such deep feelings for the Empress concubine, then back then, why did you join forces with Xiahou Rong to forge a document to lure the tiger away from the mountain, tricking the 13th Yu out of Xiling? Chu Luyue said this sentence clearly and clearly. In an instant, almost everyone was stunned on the spot. The 13th Yu? Didn't they betray their master back then? For this reason, Jiang Yuqing even issued an order to kill them, which had not been revoked until today. What exactly did Chu Luyue mean by forging a document to lure the tiger away from the mountain? Everyone's gaze fell on Jiang Yuqing. Even Xiahou Rong, who was originally standing in the crowd, instantly became the focus of everyone's attention. Xiahou Rong didn't expect Chu Luyue to suddenly mention him and even directly reveal what happened back then. He was completely stunned, and his face turned pale. He almost subconsciously retorted sternly. Chu Luyue. What nonsense are you talking about? Chu Luyue chuckled. I'm just telling the truth. You. How dare you? Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you have the Chongshu Pavilion behind you. If you can't produce evidence today, don't blame me. Before he finished speaking, Chu Luyue raised her hand and shook it gently. A secret letter appeared in front of everyone. This is the imperial edict that Lord Xiahou personally forged back then. Why don't Lord Xiahou take a look at it personally? The Love Network provided a better reading experience. Chapter 883. Xiahou Rong's voice stopped abruptly. He stared at the secret letter in Chu Luyue's hands in shock. His face was as pale as a ghost, and he instinctively denied it. Impossible. I've been keeping that item in my study, and even Xiahou Tingan doesn't know where I put it. How did it end up in Chu Luyue's hands? Officer Xiahou, what exactly is going on? Jiang Yuqing's face was terrifyingly cold as he questioned. Xiahou Rong actually let Chu Luyue get such an important item. Isn't he courting death? Xiahou Rong glanced at him and felt guilty. I didn't. I'm loyal to Her Majesty. How can I do such a thing? You'll know once you see it. As Chu Luyue spoke, he passed the letter to Yuan Wei. Officer Yuan, you're very familiar with Her Majesty's handwriting. Why don't you take a look at it personally and see if there's anything wrong with this letter? Yuan Wei's expression turned solemn as he received it with both hands. This secret letter had already been opened by someone, but the remaining golden ink on it was clearly specially used by the royal family. Even the size and paper of this envelope were strictly according to the corresponding standards. Looking at it dazedly, it really looked the same as the real thing. He opened the envelope and took out a letter inside. There were only a few lines of words on it, and the main idea was that there was a dangerous situation at the borders and that the 13 Yu guards were ordered to deal with it. Logically speaking, the 13 Yu guards were the princess's private guards and wouldn't listen to anyone else's orders. However, as the princess would usually deal with many things at the borders, and this letter kept hinting that this matter might threaten the princess, the 13 Yu guards were persuaded to go together. As the princess's wedding was around the corner, it wasn't convenient for her to leave, so the 13 Yu guards let her stay in Xiling while they went to the borders alone and planned to return after dealing with this matter. They then realized that something was amiss and rushed back to Xiling with all their might, but they were still too late. These people had set up layers upon layers of traps in order to distract all the reliable forces around her and finally make a move on her. Chu Luiyue tried his best to guard against it, but he didn't expect these two people to plot to kill her. How could he defend against that? This envelope, this letter, this ink, and the seal are all exclusive to His Majesty. But this handwriting is not His Majesty's. Yuan Wei frowned. Furthermore, this secret letter does seem to be from 2 years ago. The Yuan family had always been loyal to the Tianling dynasty. Since Yuan Wei said so, then it was an indisputable fact. If that was the case, then everything would make sense. Back then, someone had first forged such a letter and transferred the 13 Yu guards out of Xiling. Then, taking advantage of the fact that there was no one by the princess' side, they had secretly tried to kill her. Finally, he did not forget to eliminate all those who wanted to investigate the truth. This series of methods could be said to be flawless. If someone hadn't planned this beforehand, it would have been impossible to achieve this. This was clearly forcing the Empress concubine into a dead end. Yuan Wei had a grave expression as he looked at Chu Luiyue. "Miss Chu, may I ask if this letter was really found in the Xiaohou residence?" Chu Luiyue said with a smile. "Of course. In this world, there aren't many people who can forge such a genuine secret letter from His Majesty, right? Other than the handwriting, everything else is real." It was obvious that this was something that only a person who was deeply trusted by His Majesty could do. No matter how one thought about it, Xiahou Rong was one of the 3 grand tutors. He usually assisted His Majesty and had the most interactions with His Majesty. He was also the most convenient and easiest to do this. This time, even the surrounding officials' expressions changed as they looked at Xiahou Rong. Forging an imperial edict was a capital offense. If the situation was serious, it was very likely to implicate the 3 families. Was Xiahou Rong crazy? He actually dared to do such a thing. "Lord Xiahou, don't you plan to explain?" The gentle smile on Yuan Wei's face had disappeared and was replaced by a cold expression. The Yuan family had never participated in the struggle for power in the imperial court. But if it involved His Majesty, then this matter was much more serious. They had to investigate to the end. Xiahou Rong made up his mind and intended to deny it. "Chu Luiyue, you said that this was found in my Xiahou residence. Do you have evidence? Who knows if it was done by someone else? You're using it to frame me. I, Xiahou Rong, am loyal and devoted to His Majesty. I have never done anything to betray His Majesty." Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. "Since Lord Xiahou is so determined, do you dare to swear? If you really did something to betray His Majesty, then the entire Xiahou family will be completely destroyed." Xiahou Rong choked, but he still braced himself and said, I have a clear conscience. Why wouldn't I dare? If I really betrayed His Majesty, then let me die without a burial place." Chu Luiyue crossed his arms and touched his chin. "You haven't finished yet. Isn't there still the entire family?" Xiahou Rong's eyes twitched fiercely. "Chu Luiyue, Don't go overboard. I'm going overboard? I'm trying my best to prove your innocence. Chu Luiyue widened his eyes slightly. Didn't you say yourself that your loyalty to His Majesty can be witnessed by heaven and earth? Why don't you dare to continue? Xiahou Rong was in a dilemma. If he didn't say it, Chu Luiyue and the others would definitely not let it go, and he would appear to be very guilty. But if he said it, there's a God watching over us. Lord Xiahou, if you are upright, what can't you say? Chu Luiyue said lightly, but every word was like an extremely sharp knife, forcing Xiahou Rong to a dead end bit by bit. No one in the surroundings spoke, but every gaze seemed to have materialized and landed on his body, forming an invisible pressure that made it difficult for him to breathe. Jiang Yuqing said coldly, Lord Xiahou, you have a clear conscience. Why can't you swear? If Xiahou Rong really tore a hole in him, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiahou Rong gritted his teeth. I, Xiahou Rong, swear. If I really did something wrong to His Majesty, I'll let everyone in my Xiahou residence die a horrible death. Clap. 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 In the dead silence, the sound of applause suddenly sounded from not far away. Clap after clap, extremely rhythmic. At the same time, a deep middle-aged man's voice followed. Lord Xiahou, well said. Hearing this voice, Xiahou Rong's face changed dramatically. Even Jiang Yucheng, Sheng Wanwan, and the others suddenly opened their eyes wide and looked back. They saw a person in a bright yellow dragon robe slowly walking out of Lankuan Hall. Perhaps because he was bedridden all year round, his figure was a lot thinner, but his frame was tall and his shoulders were straight. Standing there, he still had a noble aura around him. It was the current emperor of the Tianling dynasty, Sheng Guanyu. Digression, it's about 12:30 p.m., a little late. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the AI network. Chapter 884. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. If all the previous disputes were surging undercurrents, then the appearance of Sheng Guanyu completely set off stormy waves in everyone's hearts. Everyone in the Tianling dynasty knew that the current emperor was seriously ill and in a coma, and had not woken up for 2 years. Many people even guessed that he might never wake up. Unexpectedly, not only did he wake up, but he also appeared at this time. Upon hearing this, Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat as she instinctively looked up. Although she had guessed that her father would appear today, she still couldn't suppress the joy and excitement in her heart when she saw him standing there with her own eyes. Seeing that familiar kind face, her mind went blank for a moment. Everything around her suddenly blurred at this moment, and only that one person occupied her sight and became clearer and clearer. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything. All that was left in her heart was nostalgia at this moment. Finally. She finally saw him again. At that time, she felt that there was no way out, and her father was controlled by them, so she finally decided to commit suicide. However, after her rebirth, she inadvertently learned that her father was actually still alive, but in a coma. Although she didn't know why Sheng Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing didn't kill her father and even tried to wake him up later, it was a blessing for Chu Luiyue. For this reason, she had been waiting patiently for many days and nights until this day finally came. The scene seemed to be still. Even Yuqi Song and others didn't expect Sheng Guanyu's sudden appearance, and they all stood there in shock. Xiahou Rong reacted the fastest. Maybe it was because he had made a vow before, or because he was called out, but he was the first to realize what had happened. He looked up at the man standing above in a daze, and his lips trembled. Your Majesty. You're awake. His words finally woke the others up. Sheng Guanyu looked up at the sky, narrowed his eyes, and sighed with emotion. Yes. I'm awake. Why, are you disappointed? I don't dare. Xiahou Rong immediately knelt down. Your humble servant is overjoyed that your Majesty has awakened. How can I be disappointed? Jiang Yuqing also straightened his expression and knelt down to salute. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Congratulations, Your Majesty. This action finally moved the others. Everyone in the square in front of the palace fell to their knees. Their shouts shook the heavens. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Long live His Majesty. Shang Guanyu lowered his eyes and looked at the people kneeling before him. His gaze was obscure. Get up. Only then did everyone stand up one by one. However, with Shang Guanyu's presence, the atmosphere had changed greatly compared to before. Most people chose to keep quiet, afraid that they would say or do something wrong and bring trouble to themselves. However, anyone with a brain would have reacted at this moment. How was today a wedding and coronation? This was clearly a trap set up by someone. They were just waiting for a good show to begin. On the surface, everything seemed calm and tranquil, but in reality, the undercurrent was already surging. Jiang Yuqing glanced at Shang Guanwan and reminded her, His Majesty has woken up. Now your previous efforts are not in vain. Shang Guanwan was stunned and quickly realized something. Her expression changed, and her eyes turned red instantly. Father, she quickly ran forward, and 2 lines of tears flowed down. It seemed that she was crying tears of joy. Greets father. Father, it's great that you're awake. As she spoke, she touched her face. Guing murmured in self-pity, seeing father safe and sound, injury is worth it. Shang Guanyu glanced at her quietly, but there was no heartache on his face. It seemed that he was indifferent. Immediately, he asked faintly, look at this scene. Are you going to ascend the throne? Shang Guanwan's crying suddenly disappeared as if it had been forcibly cut off by someone. A trace of panic flashed across her face. She didn't even have time to wipe her tears and hurriedly said, No. Because you haven't woken up, so, as an emperor, what he feared the most was that someone coveted his position. Shang Guanwan had obviously violated the taboo. Speaking of which, the Tianling dynasty couldn't always be without a leader, and it was reasonable for her to ascend the throne. But in front of Shang Guanyu, these words didn't sound right. After all, he wasn't dead yet. Especially now that he had woken up. When did you wake up? I didn't know. I've neglected my duty. Shang Guanwan tried to salvage the situation for herself. However, this trick obviously didn't work on Shang Guanyu. It's all thanks to Master's meticulous care that I could wake up so smoothly. Shang Guanwan was stunned. Master's wa? At this moment, another person walked out from behind Shang Guanyu. It was Zhou Mingxi. Everyone was stunned for a moment. There was another Zhou Mingxi beside Shang Guanwan. How could there be 2 of them? Who are you? Shang Guanwan's expression changed, and she shouted harshly. The Zhou Mingxi, standing on top of the stairs, suddenly chuckled. Why are you shouting? Don't you all know me? As he spoke, he took off the mask on his face. He was handsome, and his eyes were as clear as ice. His smile was charming. It was Jian Fengqi. The moment Shang Guanwan saw Jian Fengqi, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Jiang Yuqing suddenly realized something, and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. Could it be, standing on the 9th step, Shang Guanyu turned his eyes slightly and looked at Chu Liyue, smiling slightly. Miss Chu, right? Don't worry, I'll be your witness. Chu Liyue's nose twitched, and tears suddenly gushed out of her eyes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 885. Remember, Love Network, in 1 second and provide you with wonderful reading. She lowered her eyes and concealed the emotion of the cigarette butt. When she looked up again, her eyes were as clear and bright as obsidian that had just been soaked in water. She bent her knees and curtsied, moving her lips. Thank you. Your Majesty. Shang Guanyu looked at the woman standing below, and for some reason, his heart suddenly moved. In fact, when he pretended to be unconscious before, he had heard her voice. At that time, he only thought that this was a smart, quick-witted, decisive woman. Although her status was not high, she could still use all kinds of conditions to force Shang Guanwan and turn a disadvantage into an advantage. Now that he saw her, he realized that she was actually like this. For some reason, he felt that he had seen her somewhere before. He quickly recalled in his mind, but after thinking about it, he really had not seen her before. For nearly 2 years, he was basically sick in bed and stayed in Qingfeng Palace, day and night. He even rarely saw other people in the palace, not to mention people like Chu Luiyue who came from outside heaven's canopy. Probably because her eyebrows and eyes were too similar to Yu's. Thinking of this, Shang Guanyu felt a burst of pain in his heart, and looked at Chu Luiyue with more benevolence. You worked so hard for and I should thank you. If you hadn't taken the initiative to reinvestigate the matter of that year, I'm afraid that many people might be free and happy for a long time. When he said the second half of the sentence, Shang Guanyu's tone was completely cold. Although he didn't scold him, his low and majestic tone was full of the emperor's power, which made people breathless. On the square in front of Lankuan Palace, everyone quieted down and kept quiet out of fear. Yuan, let me have a look at that letter. Hearing this, Yuan Wei immediately responded, stepped forward respectfully, and presented the secret letter with both hands. Shang Guanyu unfolded it and read it carefully. Xiahou Rong stood with his hands down, cold sweat constantly coming out of his forehead. His heart was beating wildly, and all the blood in his body was surging up, as if even his eardrums were about to burst. After a while, his back was all wet. Only a short period of time had passed, yet he actually felt that each day was like a year, and it was extremely torturous. Finally, in this suffocating atmosphere, Shang Guanyu finally opened his mouth. We have never written this letter. His words were clear and light, but they were like thunder that exploded in everyone's hearts. He didn't write anything. That proved that this letter was indeed forged by someone else. No one answered. The air seemed to freeze inch by inch. Shang Guanyu looked at Xiahou Rong. The date on this letter is the 3rd of July. That day, I was discussing matters with Lord Xiahou in the imperial study, but for some reason, I felt very tired, so I asked Lord Xiahou to leave first and go to the side room to rest. When I woke up again, it was already today. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Didn't they always say that because His Majesty heard about the death of the Empress concubine, he was extremely grief-stricken and was unable to get out of bed? Why did His Majesty say that he had been in a coma since the 3rd of July? One had to know that when the Empress concubine died, it was the 10th of July. At this time, who couldn't tell the problem in it? At that time, it was obvious that someone had done something to His Majesty, causing him to fall into a coma. At the same time, this fake document was forged to deceive the 13U to leave West Hill and then take the opportunity to assassinate the Empress concubine. It was self-evident who did this. Who else could it be but Xiahou Rong? Lord Xiahou, it seems that you didn't leave the imperial study immediately that day. Instead, you did a lot of tricks. Shang Guanyu looked down at Xiahou Rong condescendingly, waved his sleeve lightly, and threw the secret letter to Xiahou Rong. Look at it yourself. Did you write this? Xiahou Rong finally couldn't bear it and knelt down with a plop. Your Majesty, you are so wise. I'm innocent. I really didn't do anything. Xiahou Rong cried out while secretly regretting it in his heart. The reason why he kept this letter was actually to use it as evidence to suppress Jiang Yucheng. Although they had done a lot of things together, they didn't trust each other very much. That was why he kept this thing as a precaution. However, I didn't expect Chu Luiyue to find this letter and His Majesty to personally identify it. Now he really couldn't clear his name even if he jumped into the river. If he had known this, he should have destroyed this secret letter directly at the beginning. In the face of such irrefutable evidence, Xiahou Rong's defense and crying seemed very pale and powerless. Just now, when I was inside, I seem to have heard Lord Xiaohou swearing on the whole Xiaohou mansion that if they really betrayed me, they would all die a horrible death. Xiaohou Rong was suddenly stunned, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Your Majesty, Lord Xiaohou, I didn't expect you to be so cruel to your own people, Sheng Guanyu said lightly and shook his head. After all, I misjudged you. Your Majesty. I didn't. I really didn't do anything to let you down. Someone is framing me. Someone is framing me. Your Majesty, you are so wise. Xiahou Rong was shocked and hurriedly knelt forward. But before he reached the 9 steps, Sheng Guanyu had already opened his mouth. Xiahou Rong rebelled against his superiors and attempted to murder me. This is the first crime. Faking the secret edict and deceiving his superiors is the second crime. As punishment for these 2 crimes, Xiahou Rong's position as Grand Tutor will be removed and he will be demoted to a slave. He will be beheaded in public at noon tomorrow. In addition, Xiahou Mansion's 3 close relatives will be implicated. The 3 distant relatives, regardless of their gender, will all be sent to the frontier as slaves. They will never be able to return. Each and every word echoed clearly in front of the main hall. Xiahou Rong's movements suddenly paused and he knelt on the ground dejectedly. The last trace of blood on his face faded in an instant. In an instant, all the strength in his body seemed to have been sucked away, and even his breathing became difficult. It's over, it's over. With this sentence, the entire Xiahou family would be completely destroyed. His wives, concubines, his relatives, and clansmen. Being sent to the frontier as slaves was more terrible than being beheaded directly. It was really a fate worse than death. Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please have mercy. For the sake of the Xiahou family's 100 years of loyalty, please spare my wives and children. If the Xiahou family was destroyed in his hands, he would become the sinner of the whole family. Sheng Guanyu looked at him with deep eyes. Xiahou Rong, you also know that the Xiahou family's 100 years of loyalty was defeated by you. After all, he had only himself to blame for all this. Xiahou Rong sat on the ground, his heart completely cold. Take him away. Sheng Guanyu waved his hand. Just when the people next to him were about to step forward, Xiahou Rong suddenly turned back and pointed at Jiang Yuqing fiercely, shouting with a ferocious look, "It's him. He and the 3rd princess forced me to do this." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 886. If you want to die, let's all die together. At this time, Xiahou Rong had obviously gone completely crazy. His Majesty's imperial edict had been issued, and the Xiahou clan would have no chance of turning things around. The entire clan, a total of thousands of people, would all be implicated. And the ones who caused all this were Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Guanwan. Since he couldn't live, then, no one would have an easy time. Jiang Yuqing's pupils constricted. He stared coldly at Xiahou Rong. Lord Xiahou, watch your words. Don't drag other innocent people down just because you made a big mistake and implicate the entire clan. Sheng Guanwan also panicked and hurriedly refuted. That's right. This matter has nothing to do with me. Xiahou Rong, don't talk nonsense. Innocent people? Spouting nonsense? Xiahou Rong laughed sarcastically. Jiang Yuqing, are you saying that you're innocent now? Weren't you the one who gave me the drug to His Majesty? Now you jump out to say that you're innocent and want to push all the blame to me to get rid of it, in your dreams. Xiahou Rong simply went all out and directly exposed everything. Everyone was shocked on the spot. The amount of information contained in this sentence was too much. The drug to His Majesty was given by Jiang Yuqing? Didn't that mean that Jiang Yuqing was also involved? If you hadn't promised to give me the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill after everything was done, I wouldn't have agreed to do these things for you. Now that everything has been exposed, no one can escape. He was doomed, so he had to drag a few people down with him. Jiang Yuqing's temples were throbbing, and he couldn't wait to immediately step forward and block Xiahou Rong's mouth. His face was livid, his fists clenched, and he suddenly sneered. Lord Xiahou, you said that I gave you the drug back then. Do you have any evidence? Empty words without any proof. If whatever you say is the truth, then wouldn't everyone here be at your mercy? Xiahou Rong froze and immediately clenched his teeth. Everything that happened back then was done very discreetly. Even that medicine was given to him by Jiang Yuqing in private. Other than the two of them, no one else could prove it. If Jiang Yuqing stubbornly refused to admit it, then it would really be difficult to convict him. Furthermore, my Jiang family is a large Tianling family, and I'm about to marry the princess. What reason do I have to spend so much effort to harm His Majesty first and then the princess? Xiahou Rong gritted his teeth in anger. This Jiang Yuqing was truly treacherous. This wasn't the only thing he had done back then. Now, he had turned hostile and refused to admit it. That 9 clouds yuan recovery pill was given to me by you as a reward. You dare to deny it? You have to know that after the Empress concubine's death, her funeral was handled by you and the third princess. Only the two of you can obtain the 9 heavens yuan returning pill. Oh, since that's the case, could Lord Xiahou please take out the 9 clouds yuan recovery elixir to prove that you're not lying? Jiang Yuqing asked back. Xiahou Rong had just lost this item a few days ago, so it was impossible for him to take it out now. Sure enough, when Xiahou Rong heard this, he immediately choked, and his face turned red. You know that. It seems that Lord Xiahou can't take it out. Jiang Yuqing interrupted him. In that case, please don't make irresponsible remarks again, Lord Xiahou, it's here. Before he could finish speaking, a clear voice suddenly sounded from the side. Jiang Yuqing's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and saw Chu Lua smiling as she took out a black wooden box. The moment he saw that box, Jiang Yuqing's heart suddenly sank. Wasn't this thing stolen? Why was it here with Chu Lua? He recalled that the previous secret letter was also stolen from the Xiahou residence. Could it be that all these things were done by Chu Lua alone? But she was clearly still in the Dahuang swamp some time ago. How could, this should be what you're looking for, right? Chu Lua shook the box in her hand and smiled meaningfully. I can prove that this thing was indeed plundered from Lord Xiahou's study. Because she had already taken out the secret letter earlier, everyone was very convinced by her words. The 9 clouds yuan recovery pill was the only 9th grade essence pill left behind by Taizu. It had always been carefully enshrined by the Tianling royal family. Previously, His Majesty had indeed bestowed it to the Empress for safekeeping. After the Empress's death, these items were all handled by the third princess and Jiang Yuqing. Such an important item like the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill actually appeared in Chu Liuyue's hands. Clearly, it had been taken away before. This just happened to confirm Xiahou Rong's previous words. Jiang Yuqing used the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill as a reward to help him drug His Majesty and forge a document. Chu Liyue handed the wooden box to Yuan Wei. Your Majesty, please take a look. Yuan Wei took the item and carefully opened the box. A strong medicinal fragrance instantly spread out. Shang Guanyu's expression changed slightly. This is indeed the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill. He looked at Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing, what else do you have to say? Jiang Yuqing gritted his teeth. Yes. I didn't take good care of it, so this 9 clouds yuan recovery pill was stolen. However, what Lord Xiahou said just now was indeed slander. Your Majesty, please investigate clearly. He was determined to deny it to the end. Xiahou Rong was extremely resentful and began to search in his mind. He wanted to directly kill Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Guanwan as well. But after thinking about it, he was shocked to realize that he really couldn't produce any strong evidence. Jiang Yuqing had always been cautious and didn't leave any traces. Every time they discussed things, there was no one else present. Even now that the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill had been taken out, he still said that it was his lack of supervision that led to the theft and that he didn't send it out himself. Apart from this mouth, Xiahou Rong couldn't do anything to Jiang Yucheng. He was so angry that his whole body trembled. He pointed at the two and scolded, "Good, good, good. You don't want to admit it now, right? Then I'd like to ask, if you didn't do anything to His Majesty, then why did you guard Qingfeng Hall so strictly in the past 2 years and even sent 3 celestial physicians to take care of it in turn? If this isn't a guilty conscience, then what is it?" As he said this, he suddenly looked at the crowd and sternly shouted, "Let's go. Xiong Yishui. Xia Lang. Do you dare to stand up and tell everyone what's going on with His Majesty's body? Right, and Zhuo Mingxi. The 3 of you have been responsible for taking care of His Majesty from the beginning. Now you can at least say a few words, right?" From the moment Shangguan Yu came out, Xiong Yishui and the others had been completely shocked. The 3 of them had indeed taken turns to take care of His Majesty, but they had never seen any signs of His Majesty waking up before. Now that they thought about it, maybe His Majesty had already woken up. Suddenly being pointed at, the faces of the 3 of them became very ugly, and they stammered and couldn't say anything. Jian Fengqi chuckled and said, "Since the 3 of you don't want to say anything, why don't I tell everyone?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 887. Jian Fengqi flung the mask in his hand and smiled flirtatiously. "Speaking of which, I've been taking care of His Majesty for a long time. Although I'm using Lord Zhuo Mingxi's name, it's for His Majesty's own good. I believe that everyone here is loyal to His Majesty and won't mind, right?" This hat was too big, so no one dared to say no. The fact that he could stand by His Majesty's side and walk out of Lanquan Hall with His Majesty proved that His Majesty trusted him greatly. How could others say anything? "Actually, we have to start with the 3rd princess," Jian Fengqi said with a smile. "I still remember clearly that when I entered the palace as Lord Zhuo for the first time, I happened to meet the 3rd princess. Does the 3rd princess still remember what you said at that time?" Shangguan Wan's face turned pale. She didn't even know when Jian Fengqi had pretended to be Zhuo Mingxi. How could she remember what she said? But she had always trusted Zhuo Mingxi. She didn't hide anything from him about His Majesty. At that time, the 3rd princess was very worried about His Majesty, so she asked me to reduce the dosage of medicine and find a way to wake His Majesty up. Jian Fengqi applauded sincerely. Clap. 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 The 3rd princess's filial piety can be seen by heaven and earth. In order to wake His Majesty up again, she was even willing to reduce the dosage of medicine for His Majesty. Based on this point alone, no one here can compare to her, right? Jian Fengqi's words were like a sharp sword that directly pierced Shangguan Wan's hypocrisy. Her strong and calm expression finally cracked. I didn't," she subconsciously retorted, but her expression was panicked and her footsteps were unsteady. He was right. Shangguan Wan finally couldn't hold back. She gritted her teeth and said hatefully to Zhuo Mingxi beside her, "Zhuo Mingxi, I trusted you so much. How dare you deceive and betray me? If he hadn't teamed up with Jian Fengqi, this wouldn't have happened. I don't know anything." Zhuo Mingxi wanted to say something, but he felt guilty and didn't know what to say. It was true that he did not know that Jian Fengqi had been secretly using his name to enter the palace, but he was not completely unaware. During this period of time, he occasionally felt that he seemed to have become more sleepy than before, and his mind seemed to have become muddled. Especially when it was his turn to be on duty, this feeling became even more intense. He vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he didn't dare to say anything. He was afraid that if Shangguan Wan and the others found out, they would immediately kill him to silence him. But he didn't expect that he still couldn't hide it. And today, things had turned out this way. Shangguan Wan's heart was filled with hatred, but she also knew that it was useless to say these things now. The only way was to get rid of these things as much as possible and prove his innocence. But how could it be that easy? She thought back to when she was in the Clear Wind Palace. She had taken advantage of the fact that her imperial father had not regained consciousness and had said many things without concealing anything. If imperial father were to find out about it, oh, right, there's also Jianghu. Jian Fengqi's eyes turned slightly, and the corners of his lips curled up into a wicked smile. His eyes were full of sarcasm. Later on, you also said something similar. I still remember it clearly. The expression on Jiang Yuqing's face seemed to have frozen. His eyebrows, eyes, mouth, and nose were all terrifyingly cold and stiff. The previous scenes kept flashing in his mind. No wonder he felt that Zhou Mingxi was a little strange some time ago. It turned out that it was because there was indeed a change of people. When he saw Jian Fengqi coming out with his imperial majesty just now, he felt very uneasy. Now, it really exploded. No matter whether Jian Fengqi was telling the truth or not, he and Sheng Wanwan couldn't deny it. After all, he was standing beside his imperial majesty now. What Jian Fengqi said now obviously had his imperial majesty's permission, and even, he was representing his imperial majesty's position. The number of times this young master has entered the palace is actually not many. But whenever I meet the two of you, I have to talk about the matter of using medicine back then. Wasn't that what Lord Xiaohou was talking about just now? What, you still refuse to admit it? The evidence was already in their faces, but they still refused to admit it. How thick-skinned. Dead silence. Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Wanwan both fell silent. This was no longer a matter that could be cleared of suspicion by denying it. After all, it was very likely that his imperial majesty also knew about many of these things. If he had already woken up, then, many things were already set in stone. But just when everyone thought that the truth was out and they were finally going to admit their guilt, Jiang Yuqing suddenly spoke. I really didn't know about his imperial majesty being poisoned back then. Wan told me that his imperial majesty had taken too much medicine in order to nurse his body back then. That was why he had been in a coma for so long. We did discuss about using less medicine for a long time, but I didn't know it was poison. Hearing this, Sheng Wanwan gradually widened her eyes in shock and looked at Jiang Yuqing in disbelief. What did you say? Jiang Yuqing looked apologetic. I'm sorry, Wan. I was deceived by you before, so I helped you. But now that things are clear, then I can't speak up for you anymore. You have to bear the corresponding responsibility for what you've done. Chu Luiyue was secretly amazed. If it weren't for the inappropriate atmosphere now, she would have applauded Jiang Yuqing's ability to refute. She had seen what it meant to reverse right and wrong today. Seeing that the matter had been exposed, he took the initiative to abandon Sheng Wanwan and only wanted to protect himself. But then again, this kind of ruthlessness and cruelty was his usual style. How could Sheng Wanwan be his opponent? Sure enough, after hearing these words, Sheng Wanwan completely exploded after a short period of shock. Jiang Yuqing. What are you talking about? You want to push all the blame onto me now, don't you? Fine. Since you're heartless, don't blame me for being heartless. Sheng Wanwan took a step forward, walked to the middle, and said in a sharp voice, what Xiahou Rong said just now was right. Everything was ordered by Jiang Yuqing. He was the one who attacked father and transferred the 13 Yu guards away. He was also the one who secretly sent people to attack the Chongshu pavilion. He was the mastermind of all these things. The veins on Jiang Yuqing's forehead bulged. He lowered his voice and said coldly, Wan, you're confused. But Sheng Wanwan didn't care. She had lost all face today and was already emotionally unstable. Coupled with Jian Fengqi and the others' provocation, she couldn't bear it anymore. Anyway, she couldn't deny it, and it would be difficult for her to make a comeback in the future. Not to mention that she had no fate with the throne, she might not even be able to keep her identity as the third princess. After today, it was still unknown whether she would live or die. At this time, Jiang Yuqing actually took the initiative to betray her, so she had no mercy for him. She stared at Jiang Yuqing with scarlet eyes and sneered, "Ha! What, you don't want to admit it? Don't forget, you were the one who drugged Shengguan Yu with the energy-dissipating powder for 3 years. Finally, you attacked her on the eve of the wedding and imprisoned her in the Imperial Ancestral Temple." Digression: the last 2 updates may be a little late, about 1:30. Please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Iowa. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.